Following Astrid out of the student council room and further into the building, with no students besides us in sight as it was lunch, I was tempted to ask about our destination, but after a bit of thinking, I realized there was about a 99% chance she didn't tell me. Abruptly stopping in front of a door, Astrid pushed it open before immediately walking in. Staying outside the room, I peered in, noticing that the room was a janitor's closet as it solely consisted of brooms, mops, and tissues. My previous calm and indifferent attitude immediately transformed as I stared into the small room, devoid of any light, where Astrid was waiting for me inside. Looking at me hesitantly standing outside the small room, Astrid scoffed before grabbing my arm and pulling me inside, letting the door slam shut. Not giving me any time to create a misunderstanding, Astrid immediately pulled out her phone and held it up to my face. The picture showed a circle with a full black X that had 2 red horns protruding out of the top. Legs were added to the bottom of the X, making it seem like a human, and the rest of the outer edges of the circle were dark red. As I stared at the symbols, a sense of familiarity washed over me. Recalling the djinns I had fought with Astrid at the nightclub, I remembered that the cloaks I had taken from them, which were currently stored in my room, had that same exact symbol. Recognize it? Seeing me nod my head at her question, Astrid continued. I've received intel that their organization has something planned for the upcoming festival. With the book never mentioning anything about their initial attack at the nightclub or anything at all about the organization Astrid was talking about, I could neither confirm nor deny her words, so I simply nodded. If they were to attack, that could be a huge problem for Lily and my goals. Recognizing our situation, I was confused to realize that Astrid had probably brought me here to ask me to help her prevent this organization's attacks. Why me? Don't you have your family or the academy? With the position of student council president, she must have thousands of powerful people who would be willing to help her, and that wasn't even including her family, which was a force of its own. Shaking her head, Astrid responded. No. I can't mention this to them. Was it because it would reveal her part-time job in singing? Did she really care more about keeping her singer identity a secret than preventing the academy from being attacked? Well, it's not like I have anything better to do. All right, I'll help, but you'll need to give me more information. They're called the Xylo Syndicate, and their main goal is to overthrow the High Dominion and the Empire as a whole. So, another revolution organization? Nodding my head, I prompted Astrid to continue, however. Besides that, not much is known about them. What kind of lazy source is feeding her this information? They know of the Xylo's plan to attack, but nothing else? Well, I guess we have to get the information ourselves. I have their cloaks in my room. We can use them. If they were planning to attack during the festival, they must have some sort of base set up in the capital, so we'd need to find them before attempting anything else. Nodding her head, Astrid pulled something out of her pocket and handed it to me. From now until the start of the Celestial Festival, Ren is excused from attending all classes due to critical matters that require his participation. Astrid, Celestial Academy Student Council President. Grabbing the slip out of her hands with a smile, I asked, "What's the plan?" Surely she didn't come to me, hoping I could pull some plan out of my ass and have it magically work. Today night, we'll depart from the academy and ask around the city for clues on their hideout. Once we discover their hideout, we infiltrate using the cloaks and find out their primary objective. Indeed, attacking the Celestial Festival as a whole was too unrealistic for such a small organization that wasn't even mentioned in the book, so they must have a more specific objective. Slightly opening the door to see if anyone was around, I walked out after confirming no one was in sight and immediately headed back to my classroom. Entering the classroom, I saw Professor Zia picking up the chairs that had fallen from my throw earlier, so I attempted to slip the note into the teacher's podium, but she noticed me. And what might that be, Ren? Even with my stealth rank at AC, I couldn't avoid her sight. Sighing, I walked over to her and handed her the note that Astrid had written. Glancing at the note, then glancing at me, then glancing back at the note, and then back to me, she asked. If I were to call to confirm the authenticity of this note, I would receive a positive answer, right? Did she really have that little trust in me? Nodding my head, I patiently awaited her to pull out her smartwatch and call the office, but to my surprise, she just grabbed the note and put it in her pocket. Well then, you're free to go. After a second, I regained my composure and picked up a single chair and set it up before walking to the door, but as I exited the classroom, Professor Zia's voice sounded once again. Be careful, I can't have any of my students dying on me. Yeah. What kind of teacher says that to their students? Clearly, she's jinxing me. Does she want me to die? Going back to my room, I packed up the 2 cloaks and my daggers before immediately heading to the Academy's Mana Gate. A bow and arrow would be quite useful, wouldn't it? I had some corruption farming to do. Setting the Mana Gate destination to a town on the outskirts of the kingdom, I walked through, immediately adjusting my surroundings to a nice village with no insanely decorated buildings but instead nice 2-story cottages. Since it was daytime, the adults were all at work, and the students were at school, so I enjoyed the serenity of it all for a moment before making my way towards a nearby forest. Channeling my corruption and mana, I manifested 2 pitch-black curved daggers in both of my hands. Each dagger seemed to have been created by darkness itself, as their surface was smooth, glossy black, devoid of any reflections or imperfections.
Hey everyone, welcome to Firescale Audiobooks. If you enjoy the audiobooks, don't forget to subscribe to the channel. If you'd like to support us further, consider becoming a Patreon member. As a member, you'll gain the ability to request the next part of a novel audiobook I've uploaded, depending on your Patreon tier.
Since these daggers were created by corruption itself, I didn't need to imbue them with the pitch-black aura, as it was already contained within them. It was a bit of a loss, as the pitch-black aura helped hide the size and shape of my daggers so my enemies couldn't estimate their reach, but you can't have everything. Corruption would only be lost if the daggers were destroyed or damaged, so I just had to keep them safe. Peering through the gaps in between the trees, I quickly found a horde of D-rank goblins hunting for food about 3 miles away from my current location. Wasting no time, I dispersed my 2 corrupted daggers and sprinted toward the clearing without any attempt to be silent. As I neared the goblin camp, my existence was already known, as dozens had already gathered at the front with spears in their hands. Well, the more the merrier. Pulling out my standard daggers, I threw them at the 2 goblins at the front before activating the dash and dashing right into the center of the camp. Those 2 kills wouldn't count for corruption as they weren't embedded with the aura, but I needed some distraction to get to the center of the camp. Creating the 2 pitch-black daggers once again, I chipped at my hands before using all of my remaining mana to create a shadow cage. While it was risky, as if the cage was damaged by the goblins, I would lose corruption, the benefits were far too good to pass up on. As a pure blue slowly enveloped me and the remaining goblins before turning pitch black after it was at full size, the light slowly disappeared until there was none. Putting on my cloak artifact, I felt a surge of power envelope me as I stared around to see that most of the goblins were running around chaotically as they could no longer see. Swish, swish, swish. Switching from goblin to goblin, I silently stalked my target until I found the perfect moment, then lunged at them with my dagger already directly aligned with their fatal organ. As fast as this process was currently, imagining how much easier I could do all of this bow almost made me drool. Wait, don't I have enough already? Feeling a surge of corruption flood into my daggers, I dismissed the 2 daggers before manifesting a single bow and arrow. Made of pure darkness, the entire recurve bow appeared in my hands. Colored a lustrous black as even the normally white strings were pure black, the limbs of the bow curved gracefully towards me, almost poking me in the face. Placing the single night black arrow in my hand, I effortlessly pulled the bow's soft elastic string back and knocked the arrow. From the goblin's perspective, I doubted the bow could even be seen, as the darkness of the shadow cage perfectly complemented its color. Releasing the string, I watched as the arrow gracefully flew through the air like a hawk gliding towards its prey. Having perfectly calculated the goblin's approximate location with my eyes, the arrow was right on the mark as it pierced all the way through the goblin's body, showing its perfection. A normal arrow wouldn't even have the sharpness to harm the goblin's body as it would bounce off, yet this pitch-black arrow had punctured all the way through the goblin's body when it wasn't even at full speed. Realizing that it was the last goblin, I marveled at the bow in my hands before dispersing the shadow cage and walking towards my arrow, whose tip was now painted a dark red from the goblin's blood. Opposite the shadow cage, The bow and arrow in my hands stood out immensely in the sunlight, perfectly contrasting with the pure sunlight emanating from the sun's rays. Staring at the countless goblin corpses in front of me, I sighed as I realized that all I could conjure with my bow for now was a single arrow. Although I hadn't realized it at first, gaining corruption was getting tougher and tougher every time I killed something. Dismissing my bow, I took the mana gate back to the academy before heading to the front gates, where Astrid was waiting for me. Staring at the wounds on my hands that I had forgotten to clean, Astrid confusedly asked, "What were you doing?" "Farming." "Like plants or crops?" "You think I enjoy planting things in my free time?" "You literally said farming is what you were doing. You think it's more plausible that I enjoy farming than the possibility of me lying to you? Why would you lie about that, though?" Shrugging my shoulders at Astrid's question, I walked past her and onto the bridge that led to the capital city. Using my eyes to peer into the city, I realized that it actually bustling with people, despite it being almost 9, as visitors from other areas in the realm had already arrived in preparation for the Celestial Festival. Turning to face Astrid, who was trailing behind me, I asked, "How exactly do you plan to question people?" I'd assume they would put their headquarters in a rundown area to avoid attention, so we can pay beggars or shop owners for information about recent suspicious activities in the poorer areas of town. "Sorry to break it to you, but I'm dead broke." Giving me a deadpan stare, Astrid sighed before replying, "It's from my own money." "Wow, quite the selfless person we have here, using your own money. Are you taking this seriously? I can find someone else." Stepping off the bridge and into the bustling capital city, I smirked while responding, "Bit late for that now, no?" Walking past the countless shops that were decorated with banners that said, "Celestial Academy is number 1, or go Celestial Academy," we continued to head deeper into the city. Recognizing the cake shop where I had first met Raven, I signaled to Astrid that we had entered the slums. Astrid probably chose me for the job because she knew I had experience with and knowledge about the slums of the capital from when I brought her to the headquarters. Waiting outside the cake shop, I watched as Astrid entered the shop and walked to the owner to ask some questions. A couple of seconds later, she walked out of the shop. Nothing. Following her lead, we went deeper and deeper into the city, seeing rats crawling around and drunken people fighting occasionally. After another hour stopping every 20 or so feet to ask questions to people yielded no information whatsoever, I stopped Astrid. "Let's try again tomorrow, there might be different people around." While it was true that more asking around today would be useless, I had also noticed signs of people following us through the reflection in the apartment glasses. Calling these stalkers out now would be rash, as there was the slight possibility that our followers were part of the organization we were trying to track. If they got away after we confronted them and notified the organization of our activities, the infiltration would be impossible, and we would have to create a whole new plan. Right now, they couldn't know that we were specifically looking for them, so there was no harm in letting them be. However, if they were also following us tomorrow, we would be forced to act. 2 Celestial Academy students looking for information in the slums of the capital for 2 days straight would be far too suspicious to any evil organization. Seeing Astrid nod her head at my words, I stared awaiting her further instructions, but she just stayed silent and stared back at me. Tapping me on the shoulder, Astrid asked, "Well, what are you waiting for? Is it really a secret headquarters if everyone already knows about it?" Taking a detour back to the bustling area of the city, I walked aimlessly until I was sure no prying eyes were tracking us. Using a different route with some unnecessary loops, I added to be careful. We finally arrived back at the abandoned building. Standing in front of the headquarters building, I turned to Astrid and said, "Wait, here for a moment." I entered by slightly opening the doors, ensuring that Astrid couldn't see inside, before immediately closing the door behind me. In the kitchen, Raven, who was passed out on one of the chairs, sat, and across from him sat Zing, who had red horns clearly visible as if he were actually showing them off. Walking up behind Raven, I shook his chair until his eyelids finally opened. "Wake up. WHWHW, WWH. Is this another nightmare?" "Oi, you brat, am I really someone who would be in your nightmares?" "Depends on the day." Seeing that Raven was fully awake, I pointed towards Zing, who had also passed out, and asked, "Is there any way to get rid of those horns?" "Why are you asking me?" asked Zeng. "He's right there." "Did you really wake me up just to ask me a question that you know I don't know the answer to?" "Nah, we also have a guest." "I'm going back to sleep." Ignoring Raven, who contradicted his own words by pouring himself a cup of coffee, I did the same thing to Zeng as I shook his chair. Not having any reaction to being suddenly woken up, Zeng tilted his head upwards, meeting my eyes, and asked, "Oh hey boss, what's good?" Pointing to his horns, I repeated, "Any way to get rid of these things?" Finally having some reaction, Zeng almost fell out of his chair as he dejectedly responded, "You want to get rid of my horns? They're so cool though." Interjecting from my other side, Raven replied while drinking his coffee, "I've told you 100 times, Zeng, those are not cool. You're just jealous you don't have any, don't lie." Zeng, ignore Raven. "Is there a way? We have a guest waiting outside. So, let them in? They'll be amazed at my horns, just trust me. Back in my village, everyone used to comp dash. No one gives a fuck about your damn village, Zeng." Shocked at Raven's outburst, I was stunned for a moment. This was the real Raven, the cruel mastermind who ruled over the black market. But why was he emerging now? Ignoring Zeng and Raven's exchange of insults, I shifted my gaze to the painting in the corner before turning back to Zeng. Astrid would be staying here for 5 days, so hiding Zeng in the subspace that long would be unreasonable. Even I felt some pity for the guy. He had spent over a week alone in that subspace. I wouldn't be surprised if he had some trauma that prevented him from entering it again. Snapping me out of my thoughts, I heard Raven ask me, "Why don't you just put him in the subspace, boss?" "Really, Raven?" Before I could even respond, Zeng jumped up from my seat and sprinted towards me. Don't, I'll do anything please, Don Dash." Holding the panicking Zeng in my arms, I wore a disgusted expression as I turned to Raven and asked, "Have you no sympathy? Really? You are a terrible person. Finally, some payback for all those times." Raven, who almost dropped his coffee from Zeng's sudden outburst, sighed and stared at me before sitting down on the couch and turning on the television. Turning back to Zeng, I asked, "You're not going in the subspace, but you still haven't answered. Can you hide those horns somehow?" Relieved at my words, Zeng stepped back and thought for a moment before replying, "I can't use magic to hide them, yet, but..." Stopping mid-sentence, Zeng ran toward Raven's closet before pulling out a shiny brown fedora. "I can use this." Watching Zeng put on the hat, completely concealing his horns, I nodded before heading back to the headquarters entrance. Opening the door wide, I saw Astrid tapping her foot up and down as she waited for me. "What took you so long?" "Farming. Why do I even try?" Shaking her head, Astrid headed inside the headquarters. With Astrid, Raven, and Zeng around, I felt no need to keep up the facade of Ren, so it actually felt kind of freeing talking and honestly just living without always having to consider, what would Ren do in this scenario? Sure, I had used my book knowledge to find Raven, but this entire time, we had been talking as friends and partners. Zeng was someone I met based on pure chance, and the same with Astrid. Maybe I did have some relationships to show from my time here? Watching Astrid's gaze pause on Zeng, who for some reason was trying to style his fedora, I asked, "That's Zeng. He's new around here." Raven, staring at the television, gave a slight wave to Astrid before returning his attention to the news, which was conveniently displaying information about the Celestial Festival. On the other hand, Zeng continued to stare at himself in the mirror while occasionally muttering things like, "Is this better? No, I look better like this." Shaking my head, I let my thoughts leak out as I said, "What terrible kids I have raised. Can't agree less." Finding an empty couch, Astrid sat down and also started watching the news, leaving me alone with Zeng. "Hey boss, how does this Lou dash?" Scratching my head, I considered spending the night in the subspace before sitting down on the couch next to Raven. After a while the exhaustion started to kick in, so I went to the corner of the headquarters, which I had turned into my own bedroom, and fell asleep. Waking up the next day, I saw the television was still somehow on, so I turned and saw Raven staring blankly at the screen with 3 cups of coffee on the ground. On the other couch was Astrid, who somehow fell asleep despite the loud television being right next to her. Zeng had fallen asleep on the kitchen chair, so his fedora was hanging downwards, revealing part of his horns. Readjusting the fedora on Zeng, I poured myself a cup of coffee and added sugar before manifesting a pitch-black stirrer to mix them. Corruption of the night was actually quite useful in day-to-day life. Taking a sip, I noticed that Astrid had just woken up. She was stretching her hands while getting off the couch. Snapping Raven out of his barely conscious daze, I tapped him on the shoulder and asked, "Any suspicious activity in the area recently?" While Raven didn't leave the headquarters much anymore, as he had already hired people to sell the healing scrolls, it was possible that he knew something. Ignoring my question, Raven continued to stare silently at the television, which was currently displaying an advertisement, like a zombie. Reading my thoughts, Astrid grabbed the remote and turned off the television. However, Raven continued to stare into the blank screen, which was just reflecting himself now. Sighing, I pushed Raven down on the couch, forcing him to lie down and close his eyes before heading to Zeng. Trying my best not to knock off his fedora, I shook his chair a bit before he finally opened his eyes. "You're coming with us today." It had been 4 days since we started investigating the slums, yet we didn't even have a single bit of information. Astrid and I were tired, and the festival was tomorrow, so we needed all the help we could get. An extra pair of hands and eyes would be nice for investigating. Tapping his fedora with his right hand, Zeng simply smiled and took a bite of the cold toast that was on the table. Anything but that painting. Before reconvening with Astrid, who had put back on the television, I pulled Zeng aside for a moment. "If I tap you, follow me and be ready to fight, no questions asked. Just so you know, I'll have to reveal my horns to fight." "That's fine." After putting a blanket over the sleeping Raven, who was shivering because the windows were open, I walked up to Astrid with Zeng behind me. Just like that, the three of us exited the warehouse, leaving Raven slumped down on the couch. A third-rate villain, a main cast member, and a random-ass djinn. Just what kind of team were we? Turning to the djinn, who was a former villain organization member, I asked, "Hey, Zeng, hypothetically if you were a djinn, where would you put your hideout?" Stopping midstrut, Zeng turned to me confused. "What do you mean if?" Wait, I see what you're doing, boss." If I were a djinn, I would hide it in plain sight, somewhere so obvious that no one would think to look there. Proud of himself for catching on to my obvious hint to conceal his djinn identity, Zen grinned while once again tapping the top of his fedora like a businessman. "Where do you find these guys, Ren?" Pointing to Zeng, I replied, "I found that one in a painting and Raven was an interesting one." Looking me dead in the eyes, Astrid asked, "In a painting? That's really the best thing you could come up with?" "Well, I found you in a nightclub, so I wouldn't be talking if I were you." For the next 2 hours, the three of us walked around, occasionally stopping to question people and shop owners, but yet again, this yielded no information, as we were right back where we started. There was one hint. Waiting outside the original cake shop for Astrid, who was once again questioning the owner, I looked into windows and examined the reflection before finding 2 shady figures in the nearby alleyway simply staring at us. Tapping Zeng on the shoulder, I immediately activated the dash's usage period before using it a split second later. Appearing in the alley with Zeng only a few feet behind me, I manifested my 2 midnight black daggers while taking out my standard ones. Throwing my standard daggers like shurikens at the stalkers, who had noticed my presence, I blocked off their exit route for a second, preventing them from leaving. Then, a second later, Zeng appeared on the other side of the alleyway, his bright red horns glistening in the sun. Now cornered by Zeng and me, the masked stalkers abandoned all pretenses of escaping and stood still. In the hands of one of the stalkers, a sword manifested, exactly like how my corruption of the night worked. The blood-red sword in his hands perfectly matched the color of Zeng's horns, and similar to a katana, the sword was thin yet fatally sharp. The other simply pulled out a standard broadsword and slung it around his shoulder, like he was expecting that he would not need to participate in the battle. Even as a villain, someone who is naturally very cautious and distrusts everyone, the broadsword stalker still had so much confidence in his teammate. Not wasting any more time, I sprinted toward the biggest threat in the battle while Zeng went for the broadsword individual. Swinging my corrupted daggers at the air, I sent an elemental slash right at the stalker, but he met the slash right on, instantly mitigating it with his blood-red sword. Continuing my charge, I thrust my right dagger right at his stomach. However, he sidestepped to the right, avoiding the attack, and at the same time, he swung his sword right at me. Ready for his counterattack, I tapped my right eye, instantly slowing my perception of time and allowing me to avoid the sword as it whizzed right past me narrowly. With time still slowed and my mana almost drained, I stepped back and sent another elemental slash right at his barely moving figure. Not waiting for the outcome, I dispersed my 2 black daggers and conjured my slender curve bow and glossy black arrow. Surprised by my sudden movement and the elemental slash barreling towards him, the stalker didn't have time to raise his sword, so he stepped to the right. Like clockwork, the arrow pierced right through his body, going even further before hitting and even partly puncturing the brick wall. Turning to Zeng, who held the unconscious body of the other stalker in his hands, I gestured for him to put it down before heading to the blood-red sword that was somehow still shining. It felt like I was drawn to it. My body naturally started to move towards it until, finally, my hand was about a centimeter away from the hilt of the sword. Like a magnet to metal, I couldn't stop my hand as it drew closer and closer until my fingers wrapped around the hilt of the sword. Picking up the blood-red sword, I held it in my hands, but every second I held it, more and more fatigue flooded into my body, causing me to drop the pitch-black arrow in my hands. Even though I knew it was dangerous, I just couldn't put it down. My fingers were glued to the hilt of the sword, no matter how hard I forced them to let it go. Just then, I felt a slight decrease in the force connecting my fingers to the hilt of the sword, so I immediately yanked my hand away, causing me to fall back onto the floor. Looking upwards, I saw Zeng holding the blood-red sword while staring at me with a concerned face. Feeling the fatigue disappear, I immediately grabbed my standard daggers off the ground and stood up while staring at Zeng. "How do you feel?" "B-boss, I saw you falling while holding the sword, so I just wanted to H-dash. That's not important. Tell me how you feel." "I feel completely normal. Why were Y-dash?" "Are you sure?" Hearing the seriousness in my tone, Zeng didn't dare joke around as he responded. "Just put down the sword." Not wanting to take any chances, I watched Zeng carefully place the crimson-red sword onto the ground before backing away slowly. Walking towards the sword, I dispersed the bow and arrow, which were slightly damaged, resulting in a loss of corruption, before manifesting a pure black duffel bag. Nodding to Zeng, I watched him pick up the sword and carefully place it in the duffel bag. Zipping up the duffel bag, I ensured that there were no side effects before slinging the bag around my shoulders and walking back towards the cake shop. Following me with the unconscious stalker in his hands, Zeng asked, "What was all of that, boss? I didn't know you could shoot a bow and arrow. Also that duffel bag, where did it come from? I mean, the color on it is just so perfect. Can you tell me where you bow dash?" Raising my hand, I silenced Zeng and put his fedora back on him before gesturing to Astrid, who was awkwardly standing in front of the cake shop. With Astrid following us back into the alley, I explained. "Found some people following us. There was on to us on the first day we visited as well. You didn't say anything yesterday, did you?" "Couldn't, they could have heard." "What about in the headquarters?" Shrugging my shoulders, I responded, "You never know when they're listening." As Zeng forcefully woke up the stalker, who stared at his dead teammate for a second before glancing back at us, Astrid immediately interrogated him. "Why were you following us? Why you shouldn't have done this?" Holding a dagger to his legs, I prompted. "Tell us." A smirk appeared on his face as he replied, "No matter what happens to me, it's too late for you guys." Even though he wasn't saying anything, I was using my eyes to examine his body meticulously, and his eyes were doing all the talking I needed. He desperately tried to avoid looking at the cake shop, and every time the bell on the shop's doors rang, his facial expression tightened as if he were waiting for something. Dispersing the duffel bag, revealing the blood-red sword to Astrid, I handed it to Zeng and said, "Take him and the sword back to headquarters. You know where to put them." Tightening his face at my explicit mention of the painting, he nodded his head before sprinting away from us and towards the abandoned building. Turning to the confused and distraught Astrid, I continued, "The cake shop. They were following us because we kept investigating it, and the guy kept subtly glancing at it. It's also in plain sight, and the shop is awfully well built for something from the slums. Is that really enough to go off of? They only followed us on the first day, and today, coincidentally, the 2 days we visited the cake shop. I guess, but can't that be dash? Well, we don't have anything else, and the festival starts tomorrow. I guess so. After I internally thanked Astrid for basically ignoring the blood-red sword so I wouldn't have to make up something, the two of us entered the cake shop. When I entered the cake shop, the sweet aroma of the countless pastries immediately flooded my nose, leading me to inadvertently glance at the variety of cakes contained in the display cases. Turning to Astrid, I said, "Distract the owner." Still somewhat dazed by the rapid succession of events, Astrid nodded her head and headed to the counter to speak to the owner once again. Surveying the room with my eyes, the first oddity I noticed was that there were barely 5 people in the entire bakery. How was this place making a profit? The 5 people seemed to be regular civilians as they simply ate their cakes while reading the newspaper. Seeing Astrid completely distracting the owner and the others not caring about me, I stood in the center of the room, slowly turning in a circle while scrutinizing every corner. Finding an odd-looking painting on the right wall, I immediately attempted to insert my hand into it, but unfortunately, it was not a subspace. Just as I thought. If there was a villain headquarters in this bakery, it would definitely be hidden behind the counter, where no normal civilians could go. This was the only lead we had in our entire week of searching, so I wasn't just about to let it go, even if it meant breaking some rules. Walking next to Astrid, who was pretending to buy some pastries, I whispered into her ear. "It's probably behind the counter. Well, what should we do?" "Don't ask questions you already know the answer to." Sighing, Astrid pulled out her Celestial Academy Student Council badge, immediately attracting the attention of the shop owner, while I slipped past him and the counter. Wasting no time, I used my awakened strength to deliver an especially powerful karate chop to the shop owner's neck, causing him to slump down to the floor slowly. There was a high possibility that he would be involved with the organization if their headquarters really was here. Jumping over the counter, Astrid glanced at the shop owner's body for a second before turning her attention to me. We better not have done this to an innocent man. Examining the various cupboards and storage units and finding nothing, I shifted my attention to the floor, where, after a minute, I spotted an area of the floor that was slightly more elevated than the rest. Leaning down, I made a night black cover for my fist using corruption before punching the elevated area of the floor. Shattering into pieces, the elevated floor dispersed, revealing a small ladder leading downwards for as far as the eye could see. Peering downwards, I ensured that the bottom of the ladder wasn't booby-trapped before gesturing to Astrid. After seeing the ladder, Astrid quickly regained her composure, pulled out her wand, and cast a small current of wind that surrounded both her and me. Squishing together, the two of us jumped down the hole at the same time as we slowly glided to the bottom. Why are ladders even things in a world of magic? As my shoes touched the soft dirt of the floor, the first thing that entered my sight was a long tunnel that went straight before curving to the right. Holding a finger over my closed mouth, I turned to Astrid. However, she just stared at me in confusion. "What the hell are you doing? What had happened? Did we get the wrong organization? Was there another attacker?" Feeling a sense of serenity washing over me as the noises of people screaming disappeared, I reopened my eyes, only to be met with the scenery of the cake shop in front of me. After opening and reopening my eyes, I confirmed for the 5th time that I was indeed right in front of the cake shop and not back at the academy with the collapsing Colosseum. Not again, man. Didn't I already go through this shit? Recalling the incident at the amusement park, a slight sliver of hope appeared in my mind. My dragons I had advanced the last time I time traveled, so what if it upgraded and activated my dragons will again this time? First, let's get through this alive, then worry about that. Snapping me out of my thoughts, I nearly jumped back in shock as a voice spoke from my left. "Boss, where the hell did you get a cat?" "Zung is here, so we haven't entered the tunnel yet or fought the stalker with the blood-red sword. Why is this the checkpoint, though, and not somewhere else? Did the critical moment happen now, then? Is it a clue about what I need to do? What do I need to change? What did Astrid and I do wrong?" "Wait, repeat that last part, Zeng." Boss, the cat in your arms? Inhaling and exhaling, I slowly shifted my gaze downwards, and indeed, in my arms was the cat that Audrey had given me back at the Colosseum. What does this mean? Why the hell do I have a cat now? Hey gods, do you think this shit is funny? Venting my angry thoughts for a moment, I looked at the cat, which was now standing up in my arms and staring at me. The cat's ocean blue eyes perfectly contrasted with my blood-red eyes, and its glossy black fur seemed to be as dark and black as corruption of the night. Did this mean something? Surely, it can't be a coincidence that out of all the things in the world, a cat was sent back in time with me, right? Staring intently at the cat, trying to see if there were any hints, the cat simply licked its whiskers before laying back down in my arms. This world is a joke, isn't it? Yeah, it has to be. I'm dreaming, right? This can't be real life, right? Huh, come out, who's playing this joke on me? Recalling the memories of the Colosseum almost collapsing, I regained my composure as I seriously considered what my next actions should be. Let's just put aside this cat for now. Staring at the reflection in the cake shop's glass windows, I saw the two stalkers once again intently staring at us from the alleyway. Do we attack and capture them like last time? Before figuring out the cause of the attack on the Colosseum or why Astrid and I failed, I needed to figure out why I was sent back to this specific moment in time. Clearly, I needed to change something at this time period, but the question was, what? Should I still attack the stalkers but not kill the blood-red sword one? Or should I just avoid attacking them at all? Or could I take the easy route and just skip everything? Zhang, let's go inside. Well, since Zhang was useless because he couldn't fight without revealing his horns, I wanted him to return to headquarters with the cat. After some thinking, I decided to keep both of them, as the cat must have some purpose, and Zhang still could be valuable, albeit as a distraction. Not wasting any time, as the stalkers would be suspicious if we were inside the cake shop for too long, I walked up to Astrid, who was making small talk with the owner to make him lower his guard. It's here. Surprised by my sudden appearance next to her, Astrid blinked for a moment before asking, "And what exactly are you talking about?" Not answering her question, I jumped over the counter and delivered a karate chop to the shop owner's nape, rendering him unconscious. Following my lead, Zhang jumped over the counter, clumsily knocking over a couple of decorations in the progress, while Astrid simply stood there in disbelief. Come on, what are you waiting for? Why? So just what the hell are you doing? As Astrid jumped over the counter, joining Zhang and me, I used my awakened force to crush the same elevated area of the floor, revealing the gigantic hole and ladder. Astrid, who had been awestruck by my sudden sequence of actions, immediately regained her focus as she realized that I had somehow discovered the location of the hideout we were looking for. Casting a wind current around the three of us, Zhang and I jumped down first while Astrid followed a second later. Sprinting into the tunnel, leaving behind Zhang and Astrid, I manifested my bow and arrow before realizing that the corruption I had lost from my arrow's destruction earlier was back. Slinging the bow around my shoulder, its curves resting on my back, I carefully placed the sleeping black kitten in my sweatshirt's hoodie to free up my hands. Reaching the clearing, I wasted no time as I immediately threw my two standard daggers at the scientists, instantly impaling two of their bodies, and knocked my single arrow. As my arrow flew through the air and towards the remaining scientists, Astrid appeared just in time as she trapped them scientists in a cage of tree roots, making them unable to dodge my arrow. As the arrow pierced through one of the scientists, I dispersed it and my bow before manifesting my two daggers and dashing into the cage of roots. Slicing the roots with my daggers, I forced my way into the cage before taking care of the remaining scientists, gaining some corruption. As Zhang and Astrid stared at the gigantic board with Bertus's picture, I shifted my attention to the other aspects of my room and examined everything for any clue or hint as to their actual plan. However, even after surveying every single corner of the room with my eyesight, I didn't find anything peculiar. The only things in the room were the scientists and the board. Was this cave all a distraction? Maybe in an act of desperation, or maybe I was just going insane, I slowly removed the cat from my hood and placed it in my hands. Like Simba's dad from Lion King, I extended my arms upwards, holding the cat right above my head. Do something. Waking up from my shout, The cat stood up on my hands before staring at me for a moment, and then letting out growl. After ensuring I heard its growl, the cat simply laid back down in my hands. This cat was mad at me for interrupting its rest. Well, they do say pets tend to resemble their owners. That goddamn Ren must have taught his pet this. Putting the sleeping cat back in my hoodie, I glanced at Astrid and Zheng as they shifted their attention from the board. As the two stared at me with confused and concerned expressions, I simply shrugged my shoulders and said, "It was worth a try." In a cheerful tone, Zheng gave me a thumbs up and enthusiastically said, "Well, it was a good damn try at that. You'll get next time, boss?" Looking at Astrid, who looked like she was a second away from banging her head against the cave walls, I tried to recall other clues from the previous timeline. The broadsword guy was quite suspicious, but I couldn't tell if he was insane or not. He was right, though. What we did to him didn't matter as they still succeeded in their academy attack in the end. Walking back up to Astrid and Zheng, I said, "Let's wait here." "And why would we do-dash?" "Sounds good, boss." Stopping Zheng from sitting down on the floor, I responded to Astrid. "There were some people following us today. If they're part of this organization, there's a possibility they could come down here and see that their plan has been foiled. Isn't that a good thing? If they see their plan failed, they might give up entirely. Conversely, they could also come up with another plan or target on the spot, basically making all our work here useless. Then, what do you suggest we do?" "Well, it's pretty simple. I've already done it once." Gesturing to Zheng and Astrid, we left the clearing and hid behind some rocks near the end of the tunnel. With my bow hung around my shoulders, I peered towards the ladder and saw two figures descending down it. "Be careful, they're down here." "What do you mean, Caster?" "You idiot, did you not see the trapdoor fucking obliterated?" "My bad. How did they even find this place? We hid it in a damn cake shop. Maybe they just really like sweets?" "Yeah man, they love sweets so much that they're destroying the damn floor." As the two of them neared our rocks, we all stayed absolutely still, ensuring that no noise leaked out, until finally, the two villains entered the clearing. Stopping a few feet into the clearing, the two silently stared at the dozens of tree roots and dead bodies lying on the floor. "See, I was right. Is this really the time?" "Shut it, they were bound to die anyway. They're just a bunch of decoys." As the two villains walked further into the clearing, I crawled out from the rocks, silently equipping my bow and knocking another arrow. With the arrow strung against my bow, I aimed toward the weak spot on the roof and patiently waited. It was like gambling. For the trap to be most effective, the two would have to be as far into the clearing as possible, but they could turn around and head back at any time. Do I shoot now and be safe, or wait and risk them turning back? Seeing them examining the bodies in the center of the clearing, I didn't hesitate as I let the soft string of the bow go, releasing the arrow. Rumble, rumble. As the arrow hit its mark perfectly, the roof of the clearing immediately began to collapse as rocks began falling down and the ground started shaking. Unfortunately, the entrance to the clearing was almost immediately blocked off by countless rocks, so I couldn't see how the two villains inside were faring. However, that did give me time to think about their words. My assumption from the start had been that we were dealing with a small villainous organization, so the thought that this place was a decoy never crossed my mind. I mean, considering the size of the clearing and tunnel, this place must have taken at least 6 months to be built. Magic couldn't have been used as the High Domino would have detected it, so this entire tunnel must have been built by hard labor. Did a small organization really have the manpower, resources, and time to build something like this just to use it as a decoy or trap? As the ground stopped shaking, Zheng and Astrid emerged from under the rocks and stood beside me in front of the entrance to the clearing, which was now blocked by rocks. While Zheng was happy to follow instructions without asking any questions, I could tell Astrid had plenty of questions for me as she tapped her foot up and down anxiously. Thankful that Astrid was keeping her questions bottled up for now, I broke the silence by saying, "Well, let's check the damage." As I began clearing the rocks blocking the entrance to the clearing, Astrid stood behind me with her wand in hand while Zheng simply placed one hand on his fedora. After making a hole big enough in the rocks for the three of us to fit, we entered the clearing, which was in shambles. The gigantic board on the wall had fallen and shattered due to the walls rumbling, and the previously polished floor was now covered with debris and rocks. Using my eyes, I immediately surveyed the room for the two villains. The broadsword individual was lying under a rock, only his legs visible from beneath it. While I couldn't find the other, I noticed a peculiar bright red light. Stepping onto a rock to gain a higher vantage point, I stared downwards and saw the bloodsword individual, surrounded by rocks, with his sword in hand. Staring at the broken pieces of rock and debris under the bloodsword figure, I realized that he must have somehow survived by just swinging his sword at every rock that came near to him. Noticing the light of the blood-red sword from a distance, Astrid asked, "What is that?" "It's one of them, be ready." Heeding my warning, Astrid immediately cast an energy ball, but instead of using it, she let it float idly over her head. After a moment, the entire figure of the bloodsword individual was visible as he climbed out of the hole and up onto one of the rocks. Riddled with countless bruises and blood, the figure's red sword illuminated the entire clearing, so he was able to spot us after a moment. Summoning my bow and arrow, I immediately sent an arrow flying right at him while Astrid sent her energy ball hurling toward him. Standing still, the figure simply swung his blood-red sword, causing an inferno of flames to appear right in front of him, completely melting the incoming energy ball. My arrow managed to get through the wall of flames, but it was slowed down enough that the figure could easily dodge it. Not concerned about the loss of corruption from my arrow in the slightest, I stepped back in shock and confusion. Those flames were the exact flames in the sweetback at the Colosseum. My eyes were never wrong, and they were telling me those flames were the same. But then the blood-red sword had caused it all. But who had the blood-red sword in the previous timeline? Zing. I had given it to him to take back to the subspace. Calming myself down, I decided to first focus on the task at hand as I used my remaining corruption to summon my two daggers. Swinging the two daggers in the air, I sent two night black elemental slashes hurling towards the figure while Astrid cast two more energy balls. Activating my dash, I hid in the shadows of the energy balls as I silently sprinted toward the wall of the flames. Watching my slashes and Astrid's energy balls enter the wall of the fire, I used to dash, instantly propelling myself through the wall of fire and toward the defenseless figure. Since the dash wasn't teleportation, I had basically run through the wall of the fire, so my hands were slightly burned, and the bottom of my pants was painted a dark black. Reaching the defenseless figure, I didn't hesitate as I lunged towards him with my dagger aligned with his heart. Unfortunately, it seemed like he had enough time to react as he pulled his blood-red sword up, deflecting my dagger and sending me stumbling back. Swinging his sword in the air, he sent a crimson fiery slash right at me, and like him, I stood still, facing the slash head-on. Holding my daggers in the X formation, I met the slash head-on without falling back, and for every second I held on, it became much easier to continue holding on. After a few more seconds of holding my daggers to the elemental slash, I felt my control over it grow, so without any hesitation, I sent the slash right back at the figure. Activating the usage period of the dash, I also sent my own night black elemental slash right at him, trailing behind the fire slash. Injecting mana into my daggers, I created a holographic dagger that floated right in front of me before using dash. Appearing in front of the battered and exhausted figure, who had been barely able to hold off the two elemental slashes, I swung all three daggers right at him. As my right dagger plunged into his body, the figure slumped down on the crowd before completely collapsing and finally releasing his grip on the blood-red sword. Staring at the blood-red sword on the ground, various thoughts came to mind, almost all of them telling me to get rid of it now. As Zhang and Astrid approached me, I instinctively stepped in front of the sword, blocking their sight of it. While it was possible that someone had stolen the weapon from Zhang when he was returning to the headquarters, there was still a chance Zhang had done it. Dismissing my daggers, I manifested a midnight black sheath before carefully placing the blood-red sword into it, ignoring the sudden surge of exhaustion. Putting the sheath on my waist, I stood back up and headed to Zhang and Astrid, who were standing in front of the broadsword individual's legs. We should interrogate him. Nodding our heads at Astrid's words, Zhang and I both pushed the boulder off the villain, revealing his full body, which was somehow less battered than his teammates. Waking up the villain with a sharp slap to the face, I saw his eyes flicker open for a moment before immediately closing after he saw us three standing in front of him. Seeing Astrid turn to me, I started the questioning. What is this place? Not talking, are we? If this organization wasn't as small and weak as I originally thought, there was the possibility that the organization had forced him to sign a mana contract, preventing him from disclosing any information about their group. Fortunately, Astrid seemed prepared for this kind of situation. She pulled a small green vial out of her bag and handed it to me. A truth serum. If there was a contract, he would die upon consuming the potion and being asked a question, as the mana contract would kill him for disclosing information. And if there wasn't, he would be forced to answer our questions. Of course, there were ways to negate the truth serum, as you could technically tell a lie by only partially revealing the truth or mixing the lie with the truth. But how would some third-rate villain like this guy know that? Opening his mouth, I poured the green liquid in, ensuring that he drank it all and didn't spit it out. One more time. What is this place? IHW was a research headquarters but boss abandoned it a week ago. Getting straight to the point, I asked, what is your plan to take out the prince? I don't know. Whether he knew it or not, this guy was actually counteracting the truth serum by only revealing part of the truth. What did your boss tell you? He just said to distract people searching and leave the rest to him. Looking at Zheng's expression for a moment, I walked up to him and straight up asked him. Zheng, answer truthfully. Do you have any intentions of attacking the academy? Of course not, boss. Well, unless you say so. He can't lie because I ordered him to be honest, so he wasn't the one who attacked the academy with the sword. The only possible scenario then is that Zheng was attacked while transporting the sword. This person then stole the sword and used its immense power to blow up the royal family suite. But for this person to have known about the sword, they had to be related to this broadsword individual and the sword's original wielder. This person also has to be aware of the actions and locations of these villains, which means that their boss did it all. That begs the question, though, why didn't he just take the blood-red sword in the first place instead of giving it to his subordinate? He couldn't, but why? Recalling the fatigue I felt when I picked up the sword, I realized that it might have something to do with wielding the sword too long, making you weak. Shaking my head, I left the clearing and headed back to the ladder with Zheng, leaving Astrid alone to ask whatever questions she wanted to. I had already done enough by preventing the blood-red sword from falling into the hands of this boss figure. Exiting the cake shop, I sent Zheng back to the headquarters and headed to the academy, as it would be safer to store the sword there. Ensuring that no one was following me, I stepped onto the academy bridge before heading through the front gates and entering my dorms. As I laid down on my bed, still studying my situation, a thought suddenly came to me. There was no plan or infiltration mission or anything, so how did this boss get into the academy? How did he get all the way to the royal suite without anyone stopping him? Security guards and teachers were the only ones allowed into that area of the Colosseum. The High Dominion handpicked the guards, so then that leaves the teachers. Teachers can't usually bring swords or weapons onto the academy grounds, but for the festival a certain group of teachers can, those chosen for the Battle Royal event. The villain's boss was then a teacher, not just any teacher, a teacher prestigious and powerful enough to be chosen to participate in a Battle Royal event. Was the academy safe for storing the sword, then? Thought the A/N. I think I've caught up on gift extra chapters, so I might go back to doing 9 to 10 chapters/week. At the sound of the sudden knocking on my door, I immediately stood up from my bed, clutching the sheath with the blood-red sword in my right hand. Meanwhile, the black cat that was lying next to me continued sleeping as if it had never heard the sound. Who could be here knocking on my door in the middle of the night? Sitting on my bed, I tried to use my eyes to peer through the peephole on the door, but it was blocked by something. Silently moving across my room, I considered escaping out the window, but after thinking it over, I decided there was a likely trap there. If this person was an enemy, why would they knock on the door, notifying me of their presence? Clearly, they would want me to panic and try to escape the room. Staring at the night-black sheath in my hands, I considered just handing it over to whoever was at the door in exchange for my life. All the teachers at the academy were at least C rank, and since my enemy was chosen for the school's battle royale, he had to be B rank at the minimum. But would he really let me live after I handed him over the sword? Why did he even use the blood-red sword in the first place? Why couldn't he just use some other magical artifact to attack the prince? There were plenty of artifacts in the world that could generate fire and explosions. What was so special about this damn sword? Recalling my initial encounter, where I was naturally drawn to the sword, I came up with an assumption. What made me different from everyone else, even Lily, who was also from Earth? I possessed the special trait of a dragon's will. This sword had to be somehow related to that attribute of mine for me to be attracted to it, while both Zhang and Astrid were indifferent to it. Snapping me out of my thoughts, my door once again shook as someone knocked on my door. Keeping my tone calm, I carefully concealed the sheath by putting it under my bed before responding. It's midnight. Who the hell is knocking on my door? It's me, open the door. Almost falling down in shock at the sound of a familiar female voice, I rushed to the door, putting my ear right beside it. Who is this? You know who, open the door. Could it be a voice changer? No, they don't have those in this world, do they? Yanking open the door, I saw Irene in a tattered uniform standing right outside my door with a panicked expression. Without waiting for my reaction, Irene rushed into my room, slamming the door behind me and immediately grabbing a letter and a piece of paper. As Irene began frantically scribbling something on a piece of paper, I regained my composure and hurried to her side before asking. So, do you mind explaining to me what the hell is going on, or are you just going to con-dash? Standing up from the chair, Irene walked to the window and pointed to something in the distance before answering my question. The main dorm has been attacked. The others are fending off the intruder right now. The intruder is a teacher from this academy. Rushing to the window, I followed Irene's finger and saw the scene of the Royal Dormitory, a building famed for its impressive decor and architecture, in shambles. Numerous windows were broken, pillars were knocked down, and inside the building, I could see the flashing of lights, indicating that spells were being cast. Why in the world would the teacher go to the Royal Dorm building instead of mine when I held the blood-red sword? In the first place, how did the teacher know Zheng had the blood-red sword? The only way for him to know Zheng was carrying the sword while he was in the academy was for him to use a tracking device. Staring at the corrupted sheath that was covering my blood-red sword, I realized that my corruption had probably blocked the signal radiating from the tracking device on the sword. Astrid was the last person in the collapsed clearing, wasn't she? Coincidentally, she lived in the Royal Dormitory, the target of the teacher's attack. Seeing that his signal had been cut off, the teacher must have gone to the tunnel under the bakery and somehow discovered that Astrid was the last one in the room, then assumed that she possessed the sword. Or, was this entire attack bait to lure me and the sword in? Turning the panicked Irene, who was staring out the window, I asked, "Why did you come to me? The teachers should be your fur-dash. You think I came to you first? All the teachers were gone, and the principal too. All of them must be meeting with important figures and working on setting up the festival, but still, leaving 0 teachers at the academy is... They did leave teachers behind. They left behind the one that was currently attacking the Royal Dormitory. But still, why me, of all people? What the hell do you expect me to do?" Turning to me, Irene stammered out. "Astrid T told me to come to you after the teachers. Then she and the others left to fight?" Staring silently out of the window, I seriously considered my options. Back after the Alya kidnapping incident, Liam, Lily, Kevin, Alya, Zach, and Irene had all entered the same dream and completed it together, ascending to D rank. Would Ruby and the entire main cast be enough to take a B rank? Well, at their peak, one of them could destroy an A rank with ease, but right now, they were all D rank or less, so it was 100% a no. But what could I even do if I joined the fight? Even if I handed over the blood-red sword, the teacher would still kill us to leave no witnesses alive, so that was useless. A single D rank like me would definitely be unable to turn the tides of the battle, but could I really leave this situation be? No doubt, the teacher would be able to kill all the students in the dormitory before reinforcements arrived, so leaving the situation be was tantamount to me allowing the entire main cast and Ruby to die. Sitting down on my bed, I turned to Irene, who was staring at me with eyes filled with hope and desperation as Astrid's words about me must have given her some false hope. Wasn't this the same girl who called a harasser not even 3 weeks ago? Grabbing the sheath under the bed, I tucked it under my waist. If I came face to face with the teacher, I could use it to stall for time or catch him off guard, albeit making me his target alongside the prince, Bertus. Wasn't the first timeline better than this? In that world, only Astrid and Bertus died, but now the entire main cast was in danger. Looking at Irene, who had just handed the piece of paper she was writing on to a carrier pigeon outside my window, I said, "Go get help from the outside. I'll see what Astrid needs." Beating or defeating a B rank at my level was impossible, but with all the tricks and abilities in my arsenal, stalling him for a short period was possible. With Ruby's teleportation abilities, she could evacuate everyone while Irene rushed to the capital and sought support. Was I really entrusting my life to Irene and Ruby? Just who was I anymore? Well, if I really was on the brink of dying, I would 100% escape using one of my contingency plans, even if everyone wasn't evacuated, but hey, at least I was trying. Watching Irene surprisingly listen to my instructions and rush towards the academy gate, I headed to my wardrobe, put on my cloak, and grabbed a couple of mana-boosting rings that I had gotten back from the museum. Unlike my cloak artifact, these weren't permanent, but for a short period of time, they would increase my mana capacity by an insane amount. Well, there goes my stockpile. Now fully dripped out in artifacts, I headed outside my dorm building, which was eerily quiet as no one besides me had noticed the attack on the royal dormitory yet. What if I just got every student in the academy to help me siege the royal dormitory and take down the teacher? Well, it would be a massacre. The teacher could simply cast a couple of AoE spells at the charging crowd, instantly killing hundreds of them at a time. It would be funny, though, charging into the royal dormitory with an army of 16-year-olds by my side. As I stared back at my dormitory, I noticed that a figure was exiting the building, well, a small figure at that. Running up to me, the small black cat jumped onto my legs before climbing all the way up to my cloak and once again diving into my hoodie. Well, it was the cat's choice, not mine. A/N. Do you guys prefer this novel cover or the last 1+ new character illustrations? While leisurely strolling towards the forest, where the royal dormitory was located, I started to reminisce about my abrupt entrance into this world. It wasn't that bad, was it? From going to nightclubs to doing presentations in class, I had basically been a normal student, aside from the few times I presumably saved the world. As a high schooler back on Earth, my life was pretty much the same, but instead of nightclubs, I went out with friends. In this world, I didn't even have to worry about going to college. Well, I did have to worry about saving the world instead, but that was out of my own volition. If I wanted to, I could stop at any time and let Lily do her thing with the plot, whereas with college, I had no choice. It was a requirement set by my parents for me. My parents? Huh? It's been a long time, hasn't it? I'd love to say that I got along with my parents, but that was far from the truth. Constant fights about my future, and my parents getting angry at me, telling me to do more extracurriculars and get better grades. Well, it was because they cared. They just wanted me to have a good future where money wasn't a problem and I could honestly enjoy life. Would they be happy seeing me right now? With business doing well on Raven's side and the number of artifacts I had gotten from the cruise ship, money absolutely wasn't a worry for me right now. My grades weren't the best though. Putting my hood over my face, forcing the black cat to cling onto my shirt to stay afloat, I stared at the half-collapsed royal dormitory building in front of me. Inside, it was eerily silent, and there were no more flashing lights, but just one glance through a window, and I could tell that the fight wasn't even close to being over. In fact, it was only beginning. Glancing up at the sky, I saw small particles of mana gathering and spreading out to create a cage that completely surrounded the entire mansion. In the next few seconds, the mana gathered and gathered until the entire mansion was covered by it. Unlike my shadow cage, you could still see outside the mana cage as the stars shining in the night sky were visible. However, as I put my hand on the mana barrier surrounding the mansion, I was immediately propelled back. I couldn't leave. Well, there was one way: Ruby's teleportation magic. I had considered the possibility that Ruby would just teleport at the first sign of danger, leaving everyone behind, but like me, I believed that she had undergone some transformation from her original villain identity, not to say she'd risk her life, though. If that weren't the case, I would have to stall until Irene's reinforcements arrived and broke down the cage. Manifesting a dagger with my corruption, I touched the tip of it to the mana cage and watched as the corruption spread for a second before being immediately halted and then overtaken by the original mana. Sighing as I realized that my corruption wasn't yet strong enough to take control of the mana cage that the teacher cast, I found a broken window on the ground floor of the mansion before immediately heading in. Walking through the empty hallways of the dormitory, I realized that after talking to Irene, Astrid must have gathered all the students together to fight against the teacher. As my eyes led me to feel a sense of familiarity with this area, I recalled that this was the exact hallway where Ruby and I had been when I had been showing her around on the day she transferred. Would Ruby still be in her room, or had she gathered with the others? Turning back around, I headed towards the area where Ruby had rushed to when she said she was going back to her room and left me behind. Finding a single door, I prepared to break it down, but to my surprise, it was left open as a simple push opened it. Looking inside the extravagant room that even had its own personal sauna and training room, I looked inside for a moment before realizing that Ruby wasn't there. As I turned around to head back toward the dormitory's common area, I recognized something that stopped me dead in my tracks. In the corner of the room, there was a painting of an apple. It had been the only painting I could look at without immediately getting a headache. Wasn't it in the hallway last time? Did she really just steal it and bring it here? Looking at the painting, I further recalled that Ruby had mentioned that despite the painting being simple and boring, it was expensive solely because of the name. Feeling my hood lift up, I glanced upwards and realized that the black cat had climbed onto my head and was now staring at the painting as well. How did this damn painting of all things catch this cat's goddamn attention? When time had turned back, it had been indifferent. When I was fighting the original owner of the blood-red sword, it had been asleep. Even when the Colosseum originally exploded and caught on fire, it simply did not care, but this painting of an apple on a blank canvas had captured its interest? Who made this painting? Well, I haven't heard any fighting yet, so maybe I have some time. Letting my curiosity take over, I strolled into Ruby's room, heading closer and closer to the painting until, finally, I was right in front of it. Looking at the bottom of the canvas, where the painter's name is usually mentioned, I was surprised to see no mention of the author's name, just the title of the painting. The Dragon's Forbidden Fruit. As I stared at the painting, I was just about to turn around when I felt a sudden pressure exerted on my head. Looking upwards, I saw the black cat jump off my head and right into the painting. Before I could even react, the cat's body disappeared as it went straight through the painting. A subspace? Is that why Ruby said the painting was so valuable and why she stole it from the hallway and brought it into her room? Hesitating outside the painting moment, I decided that I would spend only 5 minutes inside it before heading back out and continuing my search for the teacher. Anyway, it wouldn't really matter if I found the scene of the battle right now, as my plan was to intervene after everyone besides me was taken out, as the teacher wouldn't kill anyone until he got information on the blood-red sword he was after. Then, right as the teacher realized that none of them knew about the sword, I would intervene, making the teacher waste as much as possible. Standing in front of the painting, I carefully placed my dagger into it, watching it disappear before jumping in after it. Feeling my surroundings distort, I shut my eyes and, for some reason, felt dizzier than usual as I waited for the area around me to stabilize. When I opened my eyes, all I could see was the darkness, but then I quickly realized I was lying face down. Dusting myself off, I got up and immediately looked at the area in front of me. What the hell? In front of me stood the same circle when I had fought the djinns, and even the pedestals from the museum were there. Remnants of our battle could be seen as I recognized countless burn marks. Looking downwards, I immediately recognized that Zeng's scratch marks from when he was in here were also there. This was my subspace, there was no doubt about it. The only problem was the painting entrance to my subspace was currently in my headquarters. Had there ever been a case where there were 2 entrances to one subspace? Absolutely not. That would go against the whole reason subspaces were created, as they were made specifically to give the main cast a private space to plan things and hang out. How would it be a private space if some random person could just enter from another entrance? So, Did Ruby have access to my subspace this entire time? No. Ruby and I had found this painting way before I even stole my subspace from the museum. Then, was the apple painting the original entrance to my subspace, and the painting from the museum the second one? Wasn't this subspace technically Ruby's and not mine then? Snapping me out of my thoughts, I heard a growl echo throughout the gigantic room. Turning my head, I saw the black cat sitting on one of the pedestals. Having nothing better to do as I already knew this place perfectly, I walked towards the pedestal before extending my hand to the cat. This entire thing was a mystery, but it was a mystery that could wait. The most important thing right now was stalling the teacher until everyone was evacuated or when Irene's reinforcements arrived. However, the cat refused to get back on my hand as it adamantly stood on the pedestal, just staring at me. Did it want to be left behind? Throwing its paw out as it meowed, the cat slapped away my hand while still intently staring at me as if it was expecting me to do something. Following the cat's stare down to my waist, I was surprised to see that the night-black corrupted sheath now had some red to it. When did that start? Holding the sheath in my hands, I curiously examined the corrupted sheath as it glowed blood red. This was the first time my corruption had not been pitch black. Dispersing the sheath, I let the blood-red sword fall to the ground, not daring to pick it up, and watched it grow brighter and brighter with every passing second. Since this was a subspace, the sword's tracking device wouldn't work, so I wasn't scared of the teacher suddenly appearing and attacking me. Looking back up the cat, I asked, "Happy now?" Am I really talking to a cat right now? Staring intently at the sword, the cat gracefully jumped down from the pedestal and circled the sword a few times before staring at me once again. Did it want me to do something? You know, I'm the owner, and you're the pet, right? WWW. Doing my best to suppress the attraction force between me and the sword, I stared at my cat's eyes as it threw its paw at the sword before looking back at me. Well, this cat was the only thing sent back in time with me, so maybe I should trust it? But aren't black cats bad luck? Realizing that the 5-minute time limit I had set myself was drawing closer, I stopped suppressing my body and let natural instinct take control as my hand reached for the sword without me even doing anything. Feeling the cold metal of the sword's hilt, I gripped the sword before lifting it up like a torch and using it to illuminate the dark room. Feeling the same sense of fatigue and exhaustion seeping into me, I stared at the cat, awaiting its further instructions, but it just stood there. Ignoring me while licking its fur with its tongue, the cat seemed to tell me, "What? Do you want me to tell you how to do everything? Aren't you my owner?" Recalling how my corrupted sheath had suppressed the side effects of the blood-red sword, I mustered the last of the remaining energy, and instead of manifesting something, I sent all the corruption within my body to my right hand, which was holding the sword. Feeling a sharp pain in my palm as my corruption fought with the blood-red sword to gain control, I dropped to the floor, clenching my right arm. Slowly but surely, the room was getting darker, and the light of the blood-red sword was diminishing. As the room descended back into full darkness, I was about to relax when the room suddenly lit up again. Looking down at the source of the light, I was almost blinded as I stared at my hand, which was glowing a blood red, and next to it, the sword had lost all its light. That is not normal. Turning to my cat, I watched as he scurried away, seemingly saying, "Don't you dare fucking pet me with that crazy red hand." Wait, am I really trying to assume what the cat is saying? Have I gone insane? Waving my blood-red glowing hand up and down, I was surprised to see that my hand was functioning normally, and I didn't feel any pain or exhaustion. Attempting to control the glowing red substance, I moved it towards my stomach. My arm began shining a blood red, and the substance traveled through my blood veins. As the substance reached my shoulder shined a blood red, even illuminating my pitch-black cloak, making it partially red. Moving the substance down to my stomach, I realized that it was just about to hit the area where my mana was stored before I would stab my hands to gather it. As the blood-red glowing substance moved downwards, touching the mana particles, I immediately dropped to the ground in pain. It felt like a shockwave had just been sent through my entire body. As I uncontrollably began coughing, the floor below me began to be stained red with my blood. Looking down at the puddle of blood below, I saw my reflection. My body was completely devoid of the blood-red substance, and none of it was glowing, but on my back, there was one wing on my right shoulder. Opposite an angel's pure white and divine wing, my wing was a combination of dark red and pitch black, and I only had one wing. Staring at me, the cat simply nodded its head before sitting back down as if saying, "I told you to listen to me." Regaining control over my body, I tried to control my wing, and as my wing flapped once, my surroundings distorted for a moment before stabilizing and revealing that my position had changed 10 meters. It wasn't teleportation but like dash and increase in speed, but the speed boost was instantaneous, and it could be used infinitely as long as I had mana. The blood-red and pitch-black wings stretched all the way from the top of my head to my feet, so I stood back up. I had to be careful not to scratch my wing on the floor. Recovering from the surging pain, I looked at my smartwatch and immediately realized I had lost track of time. It had been more than double 5 minutes. Grabbing my cat, who happily jumped onto my shoulder before climbing onto my wing, I rushed back to the painting and jumped through. As my wing didn't fit, I was forced to turn horizontally when I jumped through, causing me to land face first on the ground of Ruby's dorm. Standing back up, I decided to check something really quick as I stretched out my hand back into the painting, but instead of my hand disappearing, it was met with the hard surface of the canvas. What did it all mean? Despite the fact that my subspace and that room were identical in every aspect, my suspicion started to grow when I saw my reflection in the blood puddle. My reflection was off. My eyes didn't recognize myself. There was no sense of familiarity with myself. However, when I looked in a mirror or my reflection in a window, it was the opposite, as my eyes immediately recognized me. The time-traveling cat, wherever I just was, the blood-red sword's relationship to dragons and that teacher, and finally, the teacher's plan to attack the Celestial Festival, which was not mentioned in the book. What did all of these things mean? Hearing the sound of swords clashing and spells being cast, I didn't waste any time as I rushed out of Ruby's room, only not to fit through the door due to my wing. Turning vertically, I sidestepped out of the door before pulling the cat under my cloak and completely concealing my face with the hood. Imagine the rumors that would spread if Rin had a goddamn wing on his back. Opening my system menu, a smile unconsciously slipped onto my face as I realized those goddamn words, / were finally gone. == menu == User, Rin Montclair. Class, Proficient Assassin, Level 3, 2%. Moderate Dagger Mastery, 7%. Arts, Eclipse Blade, 3/5. Stats. Rating, D+, Dream not yet completed. Strength, E+. Agility, D+. Stamina, E. Magic Power, D+. Luck. Conditional. Intelligence, E. Charm, Fritz. Passive, Dragon's Will, 2/. Dragon Eyes, your eyesight is enhanced. Dragon's Transformation, you are able to harness a physical part of a dragon. Skills. Not requiring any mana usage, the skill allows the user to move 10 meters from their current location in any direction with a cooldown period of 7 seconds. The skill does not instantly move the user but temporarily increases the user's speed until they move 10 meters. Bang bang. Bang bang. Woken up by the loud knocking on her door, Ruby grabbed a jacket before opening the door, revealing the figure of a panicked Lily. Need something? W are under A attack, follow me? Considering that Lily wasn't the type of person to lie about something like this, Ruby immediately woke herself up fully before grabbing her weapon and following Lily. Trailing behind Lily, Ruby saw countless indications of an attack, such as broken windows, torn walls, and even the smell of fire. Seeing the trembling Lily in front of her, Ruby didn't press further for answers, instead deciding to figure everything out once they reached their destination. Entering the common area, Ruby saw the group of almost 40 students gathered, with her being the last one to enter. Well, her room was secluded from the rest as she had just moved in less than a month ago, so Ruby wasn't surprised. What surprised Ruby more was the fact that no one was hurt. Examining the groups of nervous students, Ruby could not spot a single wound or scratch on any of them. The only person harmed was the student council president, Astrid, as she had a bloody scar on her knee. Was there only one intruder, then? But then where was that intruder now? Maintaining her composure, Ruby walked to the back of the common area, where the window was located, and peered out. With her teleportation skill, Ruby could scout out the mansion and then immediately return to this area, but as Ruby looked out the window, her gaze suddenly froze. There was a mana barrier for as long as the eye could see, as it seemed to envelop the whole dormitory. They weren't just dealing with some regular villain. This person had to be at least B rank to create a mana cage of this size while still having power left over. Didn't anyone tell this attacker that the academy was Gemstone Order territory? Who the hell did this villain think they were? While this wasn't a problem for Ruby personally, as her teleportation would still work so she could escape, Ruby glanced around the crowded hall for a moment, noticing that everyone was oblivious to the cage. Well, I can't just let another villain invade our territory. Walking to the front of the common area where Astrid stood, surrounded by Lily, Liam, Kevin, and Alya, Ruby patiently waited until their conversation was over. Can't find Irene. Lily, I sent Irene off to find backup as I found her before all of you, so don't worry. Let's focus on the intruder. Astrid, are you sure it's only one person who attacked you? Yes, for the millionth time, Liam, there was only one. Well, if there's only one attacker and 40 of us, why don't we split up into parties and look for him? Sighing, Astrid hesitated for a moment before responding to Kevin's question. The intruder isn't just someone. I recognized him. It was Mr. Darkwood, the professor for alchemy. I saw him on the sign-ups for the Teacher's Battle Royale. A teacher? While Ruby knew of countless villains who posed as security guards, janitors, and even students at the academy, she had never heard of a villain pretending to be a teacher. As Liam, Lily, Alya, and Kevin were shocked and stunned by Astrid's news, Ruby took the opportunity to break the silence. Lily, I think you should see this. Snapping her out of her thoughts, Lily responded. What is it, Scarlet? Pointing towards the window, Ruby purposely made her tone nervous as she replied. We're trapped inside a mana cage. As the 5 students rushed to the window to confirm her words, Ruby began to formulate a plan. With the mana cage already formed, it was already clear that this Mr. Darkwood would reappear as soon as he recovered, so their preparation time was running low. Staring at the over 40 students in the crowded hall, Ruby estimated that she could transport around 10 of them out before the teacher recovered his mana, and if given 30 minutes, she could evacuate everyone. During her fight at the museum, Ruby had already showcased her teleportation abilities to her teammates, so it wasn't the unwanted revealing of her ability that kept her from immediately starting to transfer the students. Rather, it was the fear of becoming the villain's target, as if he found out that Ruby was the sole person who could escape from the mana barrier, she would be the first one dead. Well, I already made my decision when I told them about the mana cage, didn't I? Ruby could have left as soon as she heard about the attack and spotted the mana barrier, yet she decided to stay here. In other words, her decision was made as she entered the common area with the other students. Recalling the faint image of someone she had not seen around recently, Ruby smiled inwardly as she muttered. You would be happy if I helped, wouldn't you? Even with all the bad rumors surrounding him, Ruby knew inwardly that he did not hold any malicious intentions, as the flames of his heart were pure and divine white. When she originally met him, she lied, stating that their flames were similar when, in full honesty, they could be considered opposite. While both their flames shined for the same reason, Ruby knew that her flame was a dark black even without seeing them, although her flames must have been lightening up recently. Walking to the 5 students, who were staring out the window, Ruby explained. Irene and my other teammates might not have told you, but I have access to teleportation. Can it get past this barrier? Yes, President, I can teleport people out of the barrier and to safety. All right, start now. It's only a matter of time before Mr. Darkwood makes his move. At Astrid, shouldn't we easy dash? Shut it, Kevin, we're staying and helping. Liam, do you have any regard for your own life? Sorry to break it to you, but not all of us are suicidal. He's a powerful teacher, and we're just some students. Kevin, we're staying. Fine, Lily. As Ruby began transferring students one by one out of the barrier, in between consuming mana potions supplied by Lily and the reluctant Kevin, Astrid began strategizing. Look, all we have to do is stall long enough for Ruby to get them all out. Oh yeah, a bunch of D ranks and one C rank, Astrid, have to stall one of the most powerful teachers in the academy. What a simple plan. Is this the time for sarcasm? Why do I even talk? You guys never listen? Ignoring Kevin, Astrid continued. Alya, take the rear and slow down his speed using your ice. Kevin and Liam will take the front, attacking directly with their sword, and Lily and I will cast attack spells to supplement them. Nodding their heads, all 5 of them split off in different directions, with Liam taking a quick detour to say goodbye to Zach, who was in charge of leading the students who Ruby teleported out. Taking a breather in between teleportations, Ruby slumped down against the wall, drinking yet another mana potion. Faced with the desperate stares of almost every student in the room, Ruby sighed as she got back up and continued teleporting. How did a villain boss like her end up saving people not once but twice? Interrupting Ruby's thoughts, she heard the sound of something crumbling, and a second later, the roof above the common area completely collapsed. As the dust settled, Ruby could see the scene of a teacher, adorned in a full black tuxedo and a brown bow tie, standing on the debris of the roof with a cane in his right hand. Not giving the students any time to react, the teacher raised his cane, the bottom facing towards them, before thrusting it forward twice, sending 3 wind bullets right at them. As the 3 wind bullets darted at them, Alya immediately sent countless spears of ice to intercept the bullets, slowing them down significantly but not destroying them. On the other hand, Lily took the defensive approach, creating a massive shield of water to protect Ruby and the students behind her. The elemental reaction created by the air and ice intersecting decreased the room's temperature significantly, causing a chilly breeze to spread throughout the vast common area. Stepping forward, Liam lifted his sword, causing it to shine a bright blue, before directly taking on the first 2 slowed bullets while Kevin took on the third. As Alya and Astrid began preparing a counterattack, the teacher silently raised his cane upwards, with the bottom of it facing the collapsed roof, before chanting some words that could not be heard. As tree roots emerged from the floor of the common area and countless lances of ice appeared beside the 2 students, the bottom of the teacher's cane began to shine a dark purple. Before the counterattacks could even go past Kevin and Liam, a sudden purple flash blinded everyone in the room. 5 purple lightning bolts immediately appeared in the sky above the dormitory before surging downwards. Passing through the floors of the royal dormitory like they were nothing, 5 lightning bolts, each positioned above one of the main cast members, broke through the second floor and spiraled right towards each of their heads. Being the first to open her eyes, Astrid immediately noticed the dark purple light above her, so while diving to the side, she screamed, "Dive!" Even though they were blind, the other 4 students obeyed Astrid's instructions as they dove to their right and left sides. As both Liam and Kevin both dived towards each other, the 2 of them landed on top of each other, causing Kevin to scream out in pain as Liam's elbow pushed down into his stomach, coincidentally the same place Liam had punched during the cruise ship incident. Staring at the floor below his previous locations, Liam almost collapsed once again as he saw that the wood was shattered into hundreds of pieces and that a slight fire was burning on some of the pieces. That could have killed them. As the 5 students regrouped to their original formation, the teacher, instead of attacking, simply watched them before lifting his cane and asking, "You should know that this battle is a lost cause. After all, you are the top students of the best academy in the realm. So, just hand it over, will you?" Of course, the teacher wasn't planning to spare the students even if they handed over the sword, as he still had to take care of the prince. But right now, obtaining the blood-red sword was his greatest priority. Astrid, who saw this talking as an opportunity to stall for more time, pretended to think for a moment before slowly responding. "Yes, as we are students of Celestial Academy, the 5 of us are inclined to understand that continuing to fight this dangerous and terrible battle will lead to our demise. However, we are quite confused and befuddled by your choice of words when you say, 'Just hand it over.'" Standing behind Astrid, Lily continued, "Ahem, in other words, we have no idea what we are supposed to give you." Not realizing the number of students in the common area was dwindling as Ruby teleported back and forth, the teacher tapped his cane on the floor, manifesting a swirling orb filled with darkness above his head. Psy Student Council President, must you play dumb? I have already confirmed your presence at the scene. Nobody wants their time wasted here, but if you must, I am looking for a sword-colored blood red. Thinking for a moment, the teacher pointed to the light blue sword in Liam's hand. It is quite similar to that one, except it is red. Wait, is it that sword? Did you manage to alter its color? While the teacher curiously stared at Liam's light blue sword, Astrid, who faintly recalled the djinn with the blood-red sword in the cave, said to her fellow students, I don't know where the sword is, and it is most definitely not with me. Kevin, inwardly cursing as he realized that he had not once but twice gotten himself into near-death situations, replied, So, you do know about the sword? Pointing at Liam's bright blue sword, Astrid replied, It's exactly like that but red. Alya glanced around the common area, noticing that almost all of the students were already gone, and quietly said, It's only a matter of time before he realizes that we're almost done evacuating the room. We need to keep him distracted. Staring at Liam's light blue sword, Lily hesitated for a moment before speaking. Well, if we don't know where the sword is, why don't we just give Liam's? He already seems to think that it's the one he's looking for. For the first time, Kevin actually expressed anger at Lily, and he outragedly responded. What about when he realizes that it's not? Don't you think he'll kill you then? Kevin did have a point. They were basically gambling with their lives. Realizing the teacher's attention on Liam's sword was starting to waver, Astrid stared at the others, who nodded their heads. Liam did not have any problems with the plan. After testing for a bit, he realized that he could make any sword light up a light blue, so this sword didn't matter much to him. Yes, you're right, that's the sword you're looking for. Then, what are you waiting for? Hand it over already. After Lily created a wind current connecting Liam and the teacher, Liam placed the sword in the current, allowing it to fly toward the teacher. However, Liam forgot to mention one thing about his sword's light blue aura. It only shone light blue because of him. When he received the sword, the teacher stared at the regular metal sword in his hands for a solid 10 seconds before slowly turning his head up with a creepy smile on his face. Oh, are you guys pranking me now? Is this some kind of joke to you? What the hell is this shit? As the teacher threw the metal sword on the ground, Kevin immediately turned to Liam with a dead serious face. Before we die, I just want to let you know that you are the single dumbest person I have ever fucking met. Tapping his cane multiple more times, the teacher sent countless more balls filled with darkness toward them, exhausting most of his mana. Being a djinn, his desire for the sword had taken all rationality out of him, so he no longer cared about conserving mana but solely obtaining the blood-red sword. Glancing around for a moment, Lily was ecstatic to see that Scarlet and all the students beside them were gone. However, her ecstasy soon transformed into horror as she was faced with countless dark energy balls surging towards her. Scarlet was their only way out, but now she had probably left after transferring all the students. They had been so focused on saving their fellow students that they had forgotten to save themselves. All 5 of them were now stranded inside the dormitory with the crazed teacher. They had accomplished their goal, but at what cost? While Astrid was able to stop one of the many balls with her tree roots, the other simply broke through the weakened roots with ease. Liam, who was left with no sword, was forced to retreat immediately. Similarly, Alya, Lily, and Kevin, whose attacks were futile against the tens of energy balls, retreated as well. With the walls behind them and the energy balls in front, the 5 students had nowhere to dodge. Turning to the wall behind them, Kevin and Liam immediately screamed out, "Slow them down!" As Lily, Alya, and Astrid cast dozens of spells at the horde of energy balls, their expressions only darkened as they realized that there were far too many, and their pace was only decreasing by a tiny margin. Meanwhile, Kevin and Liam hacked desperately at the wall, trying to create a hole big enough for them to fit through. Unfortunately, the magic spells cast by the girls were unable to break the wall, so Liam and Kevin were forced to make a hole the old-fashioned way with their swords. From outside the mana barrier, Ruby stared inside the house, immediately recognizing the situation inside was perilous. Even if she intervened now, she could at most save one of them, but in the process, risk being hurt by one of those energy balls. Just as Kevin formed the hole in the wall, the energy balls were less than a second away from hitting them. Ruby immediately recognized it was too late. Staring at her classmates through the hole made by Kevin and Liam in a wall, Ruby closed her eyes in preparation for the upcoming gruesome sight. She had done her best, hadn't she? It was their choice to stay behind and hold off the villain despite knowing that he was much more powerful than them. Their series of stupid decisions had led them to their death. But then why did she feel sad and nervous? Why was her head spinning in circles? Why were her legs trembling? What was she feeling right now? It was their choice. They could have escaped immediately upon hearing of her teleportation ability, yet they decided to stay. Was this what a hero was? Someone who prioritizes the welfare of others over their own, even towards those they do not know personally. It was such a simple definition, yet Ruby had never met someone who had not only acted based on it but didn't expect anything in return. Sure, there were heroes from the government, but they only did it for the money. If the government stopped paying the heroes, then they would all disappear and do their own thing without any care for the world. Ruby was mistaken. When she had begun teleporting people out of the mana barrier and when she held off djinns at the museum, she believed that she was a hero. No, that wasn't it. In both scenarios, her death was never a possibility, so she was content helping out, but with death now in the picture, all she could do was watch from a distance. She had never prioritized the safety of others over herself. For Ruby, it wasn't the realization that she wasn't a hero that hurt, it was the fact that she had deluded herself into genuinely believing that she was a hero. She had become the very thing she hated the most. A fake, a fraud, and a phony. Those students, Alya, Astrid, Lily, Liam, Kevin, and even Zach were true heroes. Forcing herself to open her eyes, despite her entire body resisting, Ruby opened her eyes wide, prepared to face the aftermath. However, there was no blood. There were no severed limbs. There were no dead bodies. Instead, there was a cloaked figure with one pitch-black and blood-red wing attached to his right shoulder, which swayed back and forth in the cold night breeze. Looking at the distance between the trapped main cast and the charging dark energy balls, I finally emerged from my spot. They had done well, in fact better than I expected. Whatever they had done, they had managed to break the djinn's mentality. Like the Minotaur back during practical training, he no longer held any sense of reason. He was overcome by his desire to get the blood-red sword back. In fact, his sense of reason was so far gone that he didn't even realize that his tracking device on the sword had re-enabled, as my corruption was no longer blocking it. Using my eyes to calculate the perfect route where I could pick up all of the main cast while getting through the hole at the same time, I repositioned myself before flapping my wing twice. Feeling my surroundings distort, I once again used my eyes to grab each main cast member as I sped past them for less than a second. With all of them now in my hands, I flapped my wing once again, instantly speeding right through the hole and into the outside world. Dropping the 5 of them, who had not yet adjusted to their current situation as they had their eyes closed, on the ground, I glanced around, immediately spotting Ruby. The tens of dark energy balls were still heading for us. I had just given us some more time. Get them? As the dark energy balls broke through the walls like they were made of paper, Ruby, despite not knowing my identity, immediately teleported beside me. Ignoring my presence, Ruby, one by one, teleported all of them outside the mana cage within less than 10 seconds. That ability really was something else. Awestruckingly, staring at the disappearing and repeating figure of Ruby for a second, I snapped out of my thoughts as the dark energy balls neared me. Flapping my wing 3 times in quick succession, I disappeared out of the range of the swarm of energy balls and appeared on the other side of the dormitory. As the swarm of dark energy balls directly collided with the mana barrier, a shockwave was sent throughout the entire dormitory. I felt the ground around me shake, and even more pillars of the dormitory collapsed. As the smoke surrounding the area disappeared, I saw that even though the mana barrier had no hole, bunches of mana were leaking out of it, making it significantly weaker. Just what I needed. Not waiting for the teacher's next move, I instantly manifested my 2 corrupted daggers before once again touching their tip to the mana cage. Unlike the last time, my corruption persisted, usurping the authority of the original mana before spreading like a plague upwards. Before the teacher even emerged from the dormitory, The entire mana cage had turned pitch black, so nothing could be seen from the outside or from the inside. Well, that was unless you had my eyes. My perfect environment, my boosted cloak attributes, my new wing power-up, and finally, my countless mana ring artifacts. Was it enough to beat a B rank? Well, I wasn't sure, but it was a good thing that the teacher couldn't even be considered a B rank. With his loss of rationality and current low mana, the teacher was in no way classified as a B rank anymore, more like a mid-C rank. Flapping my wing again, I reappeared in front of the broken wall, which the swarm of dark energy balls had brought down. Peering inside, I immediately spotted the teacher, who was frantically searching around instead of doing the logical thing and casting a light spell. Flapping my wing, I appeared right in front of him, thrusting my right dagger forward. However, he was able to react in time as he threw his cane up, blocking my dagger. Despite its normal appearance, the cane was actually rock hard as it managed to repel my dagger without even receiving a scratch. Well, I guess I just wasn't simply fast enough. Stepping back, I flapped my wing, then thrusted my dagger forward, then flapped my wing, reappearing in another position beside the teacher, then pushed my other dagger forward, then flapped my wing again and reappeared in another position beside the teacher, and then used my other dagger. And again and again and again and again. Moving so fast that countless speed mirages were created, the teacher was unable to discern my location as he relied solely on instinct to block my dagger strikes. However, his instinct simply wasn't good enough. As I disappeared before he could counterattack and reappeared in another position beside him with my daggers already ready, countless stab wounds began to form on the teacher's body. Flapping my wing one last final time, I appeared on the roof above the djinn, using it to boost downwards with my dagger's tip aimed right at the djinn's head. Using his cane to attempt to hit one of my countless speed mirages surrounding him, the teacher was oblivious as my dagger pierced right through his head. Watching his lifeless body slump to the floor, I grabbed my dagger, which remained pitch black despite the blood all around the teacher's wound, and prepared to walk back. Then I collapsed. When I fell to the floor, I was surprised to find that my back directly hit the floor instead of my wing. My wing had disappeared. Using some of my remaining energy, I moved my hands to my shoulder, where my wing had been attached, and surely enough, there was nothing. Moving back my hand, I noticed that it was completely drenched in blood, and the wooden floor below my back was also drenched in blood. I had overexerted myself. The countless mana rings on my fingers had cracked and disappeared, my entire body was trembling with pain and exhaustion, and half of my back was covered in blood. Using the dragon's wing without knowing the consequences of it or what it required, mana, corruption, or something, had cost me terribly. Lying lifelessly on the floor, I slowly gave in to my body as my eyelids began to close, causing my whole world to go black. Resisting the urge one last time, I managed to open my eyes. Right above me, looking directly into my eyes, was a female with long, glossy black hair and blood-red eyes. Opening my mouth, I attempted to say something, but my mind abruptly went blank, and my world turned black as I finally gave in. Hey Rudash. A/N, creating a stockpile so only 1 to 2 chaps a day. Chap equals gift / every 100 PW or 20 golden tickets. Regaining consciousness, I attempted to open my eyes or move any part of my body, but nothing happened despite my desperate attempts. Forced to stay in a world of pitch darkness as I couldn't open my eyes, various scenarios flashed through my head as I attempted to pass the time. Did the authorities find me next to the teacher's body and apprehend me? Was I brought to the hospital for my wounds? Where even was I right now? Honing my ears, I heard what I thought were birds chirping. As I continued to stay in my pitch-black world, a cold breeze enveloped me, causing me to shiver more than usual. Did I not have clothes on? Was I outside? Why were there birds? Giving in to my curiosity, I used all my remaining energy to force my eyes open. Almost immediately, the rays of the bright morning sun appeared in my vision, causing me to close my eyes again due to the brightness. I guess I'll have to wait. As I patiently waited for my energy to recover, I recalled my sudden breakdown yesterday. What was the reason for it? Was I so just physically exhausted that I collapsed, or did I run out of mana and suffer from mana exhaustion? But then, How come I didn't feel it until the last second? Until moments before my collapse, I felt physically fine, and I was sure that my mana supply was not empty. Maybe the adrenaline from the fight had caused me to lose my sense of reason temporarily? Or was it something completely different? Realizing I had more than enough energy and could once again move my body, I decided to leave those questions for when I had recovered. Using my hands to press against the floor to lift myself up, I opened my eyes only to be greeted by the familiar scene of a forest. Looking around at the surrounding trees, a sense of familiarity emanated from my eyes, causing me to recall that this was near the exact area where the Academy's secret entrance was. Moving my hands to my right shoulder, where my wing used to be, I felt the hard surface of a bandage instead of my shirt. In fact, my entire back and chest were covered by these bandages, which were painted a light red from all my blood. Snapping me out of my thoughts, a familiar voice spoke from behind me, causing me to fall back down onto the forest floor. "Long time no see, Ren." Turning my head, I saw Ruby dressed in some jeans and a crop top with her long hair tied into a ponytail. It had been a long time, but there was something much more important weighing on my mind. What did she know? Did she know I had wings? Did she know I was the figure in the cloak? Turning my head to Ruby, I immediately spoke with a tone of urgency. "Astrid sent me to he dash." "Oh, I know. The student council president told us that even before attack, so why don't you just shut up about that stuff?" Astrid told them that Irene was going to get me and the teachers? So, she thinks I was there because Irene asked me to go? That wing you had yesterday was pretty cool though. Where did you get it from? Is it a store nearby? Yeah. She was more curious about the wing than how I was able to kill the teacher. Standing up, I put on my shirt, which lay beside me, and leaned against a tree while sneaking glances at Ruby to survey her. Was she purposely playing dumb? Meeting eyes with Ruby, she flashed me a quick smile before running over to my tree. "Well, since you're fine, let's explore the festival." Grabbing my shirt, Ruby didn't wait for my response as she dragged me behind her while walking out of the forest and towards the looming Colosseum. Just as we were about to leave the forest, I felt a sudden pressure on my shoulder, causing me to wince in pain. There on my shoulder sat a little black cat, who stared at me for a moment before sitting with no regard for how it was hurting me. Well, whether it knew it or not, it helped me yesterday. Exiting the forest, my eyes were immediately overwhelmed as the streets of the academy were filled with thousands of tourists, students, and even teachers. Clasping my head in pain as the overload of information gave me a headache, Ruby stared at me with a concerned expression before searching her backpack. After a moment, her hand emerged from her bag with a pair of dark black sunglasses. "Too bright for you?" Nodding my head, I graciously accepted the sunglasses and immediately put them on. With the lens of the sunglasses blocking my eyes, the amount of information I was taking in was much less and more manageable for my brain. As the two of us continued to walk toward the Colosseum, Ruby abruptly stopped in front of one of the booths, staring at a figurine. Noticing that it was a religious booth due to the church symbols on it, I glanced at the figure, which was a depiction of Saint Elena, an angel. Dressed in a pure white cloak with long blonde hair, the angel had two beautiful and divine white wings stretching from both her shoulders. Pointing at the wings, Ruby stifled in a laugh while asking, "Is that your SI dash? Not funny. I think your brain might still be hurt from the fight because it is quite comedic. So, now we're resorting to calling me brain dead, really? When you go low, I go lower. When did I go low? Lying is a sin, you know?" With that, Ruby turned away from the booth and continued in the direction of Colosseum. After finding the student section of Colosseum, the two of us headed in before quickly finding seats in the second row. Since today was only the first today, there would be no events with Liam's, but that didn't mean it wouldn't be interesting. Something about watching the future most powerful people in the world struggle in food eating contest made me laugh. The cat, which was resting in armrest of my seat, snapped me back to reality by jumping back on my shoulder and staring at my side profile. Perhaps I just forcing myself to laugh to avoid thinking about Ruby? As I stared at Ruby, who was belatedly enjoying the match, I was confused on why she kept silent and didn't ask a single question for the entire 2 hours we were at the Colosseum. Why did I lie about my wing? How did I have a wing? How did I kill the teacher? Why did I try to hide my identity? If I was in her situation, I would have bombarded the other party with questions until I received valid answers, yet Ruby seemed satisfied just sitting next to me. As the final contest ended for the day, I got up from my seat, following Ruby out of Colosseum. While I did want to leave this stressful situation, she was the one who teleported me out of the dormitory, saving me a lot of trouble by not letting the authorities discover me. At least I owed her this much. What would I even say to them if they found me lying right next to the dead body of the teacher? While Ruby went to use the restroom, I waited outside the Colosseum, checking up on the news about the incident on my smartwatch. With the government's help, Celestial Academy had managed to keep the news from spreading outside the Academy, so there were no articles about it. However, the Academy's public chat room was crowded as different people were discussing the incident nonstop. I mean, who wouldn't be curious if they woke up one day just to see the entire royal dormitory destroyed? So far, the assumption that most people had came up with was that Ruby and the rest of the main cast had been the heroes of the incident and defeated the teacher Jin using the power of teamwork. They were able to neither confirm nor deny this, as no students from the royal dormitory were allowed to speak up about the incident. While Astrid might believe it's me who saved them as she called for me, I could just say I was scared and never came. A true third-rate villain. On the other hand, the rest of main cast probably didn't see my appearance and just believed Ruby had came to save them. While that sounds good in theory, that could be problematic in the future. Who would have thought that Ruby and I, a bunch of villains, would be the true heroes of the incident? Looking up from my smartwatch, I saw Ruby emerging from the bathroom. Walking past me without saying anything, Ruby wore an indifferent expression as she headed in the direction of the dormitory buildings. Seeing her head in the direction of the dormitories reminded me of something. What are you gonna do now that your dormitory is destroyed? Oh, that? They paid to give all of us 5-star hotel rooms in the capital. Oh, so I, the hero, get to sleep in a small dorm room while the victims, who ran away at the first sign of danger, get an all-expense-paid vacation? Blasphemy, I say. As night was nearing, the streets were crowded with tourists heading to the front gates, so Ruby used the forest shortcut to get to the main gate. Walking through the forest, trailing slightly behind Ruby, reminded me of the first few days I had spent on the mountain range, looking for the dragon's eye. When times had been much simpler. Sure, I was powerless and weak, and one slight wrong move could result in my death from a monster, but at least death was my only worry. Now, I had to worry about death alongside keeping the plot together, becoming more powerful, not exposing my identity, and finally, other people besides myself. What if I had never come back to the academy? Would life have been much simpler then? At that point, I didn't know Lily was also from Earth, so I would have assumed that the plot would go precisely as in the book and that the world would have been saved just like in the book. With the meager savings I had received from my father, I would have lived in that small mountainside town. I would have worked a regular job to earn wages, bought a small wooden cabin to live in, and enjoyed the simplicity of life there. No, the old me would have hated that. Simply accepting my circumstances in this new world and pretending everything was real and not a book instead of trying everything to get back to Earth. The old me would have rather jumped off the peak of the mountain range. But would me right now like that? It's not like I would be leaving anything behind at the academy. Lily knew the plot, and unlike me, she seemed to care about the people around her. Sure, she was a bit naive, but wouldn't she be more than qualified enough to keep everyone safe? Ruby, Raven, Xing, Jean, Han, Astrid, and the main cast would all be safe with Lily's guidance, wouldn't they? But would I be fine with that? Leaving everything to someone else? Well, I guess already knew the answer. I mean, me still being at the academy despite having enough money to live comfortably was answer enough. Looking upwards, I saw our surroundings shift as the forest ended, and we neared the railing that separated the edge of the academy from the ocean. Walking up to Ruby, who was leaning on the railing, I stood beside her, staring at the vast dark blue ocean before me. Turning to Ruby, who was also focused on the ocean, it felt like an immeasurable burden was weighing on me. In fact, every time I talked or even looked at anyone related to the old Ren, that burden only increased. It was all a lie, wasn't it? As the memories of spending time with all of them resurfaced in my head, A sudden thought flashed through my head. The times I had spent hanging out and talking to Jean and Han, whether on the smartwatch or in person. The times I joked or messed around with Raven and Zeng, and the times I explored with Ruby and Astrid. Wasn't it fine for it all to be a lie? Was it my fault I was transferred into this body? Was it my fault I had taken this body? Why was I blaming myself? Couldn't I just accept this lie? I had accepted that this world, alongside everyone else in it, was real, so why couldn't I accept that I was the real Ren now as well? I was no longer Silas from my life on Earth, I was Ren. The time had long passed since I needed to act like the old Ren. This body, these relationships, they were all mine, weren't they? As Ruby noticed I was staring at her, I asked, "Did you know me before we met at the hideout that day? Why did it matter if people thought I wasn't the original Ren at this point? Why should I care? It's my body and mind now, isn't it?" Shaking her head, to my surprise, Ruby replied, "No, but I would be lying if I said I didn't know your family." So, the old Ren played no part in our current relationship? Why had I been worrying all this time and avoiding her, then? Without me even asking anything, Ruby continued. "That's not why I came to the academy, though. Not why I befriended you or continued to talk to you. So then why?" Turning to face me, Ruby got on her tippy toes to reach my height and put her hand over my mouth before replying. "I've answered one of your questions, so now it's your turn." Nodding my head, I said, with her hand still covering my mouth. Ask away. What happened last night?" Shrugging my shoulders and pushing her hand away, I replied. "Nothing big, just killed some big-shot teacher. Made quick work of him." "Oh really?" "Yeah, I think I heard that the top first years and the student council president couldn't even take him out. What a bunch of frauds, no. You know, you are calling me one of those frauds, right? You sure? The whole academy seems to be calling you a hero and their savior. Quite the villain boss you are. Oh, I heard some rumors flying around the academy that say you were actually the mastermind behind the whole attack." "Really? Really? How was I the mastermind behind the whole thing? Was my reputation that bad? I can't even blame Rin now. I've been in this world for more than 2 months, and it's even gotten worse. Is my suffering really that funny to you, Ruby? Maybe check your smartwatch next time when I message you." Sighing, I checked my smartwatch and finally turned off the D&D mode of my message apps, causing a flurry of messages to be released as my phone started ringing uncontrollably. Looking at Ruby, who was smirking, I pressed further. "So, why did you come to the AC dash? Oh, it's getting late, isn't it? Sorry, but the 5-star hotel has a curfew, so I must depart." Really had to emphasize the 5-star, didn't you? "Oh, maybe if you defeated the teacher and saved the top first years from dying, you could have gotten a hotel room. Real funny one, aren't you?" Watching Ruby depart to the main gate of the academy, I turned around and headed back to my shabby and old and small and disgusting dorm room. Why do the real heroes always get treated the worst? A/N. Felt the identity thing was starting to get repetitive, so I used this chapter to end it off. Did you guys think it was rushed or anything? Waking up the next morning, it felt like the gigantic burden weighing on me since the end of the cruise ship incident had lifted. It felt freeing. The festival would go on for the next couple of days, and there would be no classes. I had no reason to intervene in the plot during the festival, so basically, this time was all free for me. However, after the festival, the plot jumps right back into action as the travel club visits the Elven realm under Princess Alya's guidance. That would require a lot of my guidance if Lily did what I thought she would. Having spent the last week constantly investigating or worrying about the attack on the Colosseum, I had no intentions of doing anything for the time being. Unable to sleep due to the loud noise of the tourists outside my window, I got up and prepared to head out for the day. When I checked my smartwatch, I was surprised to see that Jean and Han had continued to use the group chat despite my not responding to either of them for at least a week. "Han, Jean, we're meeting up by the Colosseum at 11, right?" Jean, "Yeah, we'll figure out what to do once we're there." Ren, "Mind if I join in?" Han, "Rin." Jean, "Not if you don't tell us where the hell you've been for the past week." Han, "Yeah? You weren't even in class. Did you not get in trouble? Jean, if you found a way to skip class without being trouble and didn't tell us, you're dead, buddy. Ren, you won't believe me, but I spent the past week working on a special task force with the one and only student council president to protect the school. Jean, yo, bro, if you don't want to tell us, just say so. Han, you've had a week, and that's the best excuse you could come up with? Ren? See, you guys never believe me. Jean, alright bro, whatever you say. See you at 11. Han, yeah, we'll see you at 11. Ren, wait, mind if I bring my little brother? Han, you're what? Jean, you have a brother? Ren, yeah, he's my long-lost little brother. I just found him recently in the slums. Han, alright? Jean, I'm fine with it, if he's real. Ren, yeah, he's real. I'll see you too. As students of the academy, we were allowed a tourist ticket without paying, so I could bring one person into the academy for free. Who else but him? Leaving the academy and entering the capital, I headed straight for headquarters as it was already almost 11. As I entered the capital's slums, I noticed the cake shop with the underground hideout for the teacher had been shut down. The windows were broken, and I could see countless homeless people inside stealing the chairs or anything else of value. That tunnel could be quite the hideout, couldn't it? While the cake shop in itself was a decent investment as it could provide some daily income, the hideout below must have taken ages to create, and it would be the perfect place for me to train. It was so far underground that even if I used countless elemental slashes, no one would notice. The royal family investigators would just think of it as a normal cake shop and not investigate it, so they wouldn't even find the tunnel, meaning the shop would be very cheap. And Raven and Zeng would be pretty happy if I bought a cake shop, wouldn't they? Reminding myself to check the newspaper for the future listing of the cake shop after the royal family repossessed it, I continued on my way to the headquarters. Without knocking or anything, I unlocked the headquarters doors with my key and entered inside. Raven, lying on the couch next to the television, was still fast asleep despite it being almost afternoon. On the other hand, Zeng lay slumped over in the chair once again, a plate of ice cream in front of him. Quite the evil Jin he was, eating strawberry ice cream. Sighing at my worker's laziness, I walked up to the couch with Raven sitting on it and swiftly and cleanly removed the blanket from him. With my enhanced eyesight, I saw Raven's eyes open for a short moment, meaning he was awake, yet he still pretended to be asleep. Oh, asleep, are you? Watching him and staying still, I made sounds to make it seem like I was moving around and picking things up until Raven, after a couple of seconds, burst upwards and screamed. No, I'm awake. Don't do anything, please. Staring me motionless right above him, Raven blinked for a second before sighing. You really have to come right in the morning, don't you? It's almost 11. What morning are you talking about? Just let me sleep. As Raven pulled up his blanket to cover his face, I replied. You're coming with me today. Whenever you say that, it always means something bad. You're coming with me to a festival, relax. Scaring the shit out of me, I heard a voice sound from behind me. What about me, boss? Turning around, I saw Zeng sitting up on his chair with his horns out and continuing to eat his ice cream. When you do something about those horns, we can talk. But they look go dash. Yeah, they look so good that everyone just runs around screaming in horror when they see them. As Raven sluggishly walked to the bathroom, I waited while Zeng walked to the mirror and stared at his horns for a solid minute. Finally, Raven emerged from the bathroom in some decent clothes I had gotten him recently, as all his previous ones were in tatters. Wearing a pair of navy blue jeans and a black shirt, Raven walked out with his wet black hair covering the top half of his face. Could he at least look presentable? I'm calling him my brother. Walking up to Raven, I pushed his hair up, revealing his onyx black eyes, and parted it to the side before tucking in his shirt and handing him a jacket. Raven, who did not care for his looks, simply stood still with an indifferent expression, allowing me to make him look presentable. Looking at Raven's finished appearance like a proud father, I tapped him on the shoulder before leading him out of headquarters and towards the academy. As we reached the academy gates, I presented the guard with my student ID, and he stared at Raven for a second before letting us through. I thought I did a good job. Rushing towards the Colosseum with Raven trailing behind me, We arrived a minute early, spotting Jean and Han a few feet away from us. Walking up to them, I pulled Raven beside me and said, "Hey, you two, this is my brother, Raven." Nudging Raven like he was a baby, I said, "Say hi, Raven." Slowly turning his face with an expression that even I couldn't decipher, Raven choked out the words. "Hi, I'm Raven." Looking at me struggling to hold in my laughter, Han and Jean stared at us for a second before they both said, "And nice to meet you, Raven." "Well, where to, guys?" As the four of us walked through the festival, I had to keep a constant eye on Raven, who always seemed to wander off to some random booth. Stopping in front of one of those carnival booths where you had to land a ring on one of the 100 bottles across the floor, Han and Jean each gave it an attempt before failing. Exchanging a ring for one of the tickets I had received, I used my eyes to calculate the future trajectory of the ring before adjusting it so it perfectly overlapped with the bottle's lid. Tapping Raven, who was watching countless people fail the game, on the shoulder, I smirked and said, "Watch this." As I began the throwing motion, my hand behind my shoulder, I moved forward at the perfect pace. Just as I was reaching the perfect place to release the ring, I felt a sudden pressure on my shoulder. The pressure messed up my entire throwing motion, as my ring went flying in the complete opposite direction and far away from the ring's bottles, and right at someone's head. Ow, asterisk. Pretending I didn't hear or see anything, I turned back around to Raven, who was smiling more than usual. Asterisk, how did you manage to miss that damn bad? It's something you'll understand when you're mature. Really, that's your best excuse? Turning to the source of my miss, I saw my cat silently sitting on my shoulder while licking its paw. When I had woken up, the cat was gone, presumably through the open window, and now it had just reappeared. It really just came and went as it pleased. As we were finished with the game, I turned around to look for Han and Jean, but after glancing around a bit, I found them trying to talk to some girls. Before, I dismissed girls because I didn't believe this was the real world with real people, but now, what was my excuse? Was I going to become just like Han and Jean? Raven, noticing me staring at Han and Jean with the group of girls, curiously asked, "Aren't you going to join them?" Shaking my head at Raven's answer, I replied, "Then what would I do with you? I could just go back to Het Kadash. You know you always complain you have no breaks, but when I bring you to a lavish festival like this, you just complain." Ignoring my previous words, Raven glanced back at the group of girls before saying, "Ah, you already have that one girl you brought to the headquarters earlier, don't you?" "Ichem? What are you talking of dash? Go celestial actemy. Let's go CD." Interrupting my words were the sounds of countless people yelling chants, signifying the start of the events within the Colosseum. Liam would be competing today, wouldn't he? Before I knew it, Han and Jean had already come back to the booth and ditched the group of girls. "Let's go watch." "What are you waiting for? Let go." As Raven and I followed the two to the student section of the Colosseum, I realized we had actually arrived fairly early, as almost all of the seats were empty. Choosing the first and best row, we four sat down. However, Han and Jean immediately left to get snacks, leaving jackets on their seats. Raven was in complete awe upon seeing the size of the Colosseum. He was so entranced that he didn't even notice me tapping him on the shoulder. Well, he had lived in the slums all his life, so things like this Colosseum had probably only been in his dreams. This book's damned author, leaving a good kid like Raven to rot away in the slums. Leaving Raven to enjoy this new experience, I grabbed the cat off my shoulder, which still hurt from the incident 2 days ago, and placed him on my lap. As more and more students flooded into the student section, the sweet and calming silence soon disappeared and transformed as excited students loudly discussed the events and who would win. As the fireworks emerged from the Colosseum and exploded into the sky, the contestants of the first event finally arrived, and Liam, Ruby, the main cast, and the transfer students emerged, adorned in their academy suits. Watching the events was anticlimactic, to say the least. What point is there in watching a competition if you already know the winner? Turning my side, Raven didn't seem too interested in the fighting either, as the novelty of the Colosseum had already worn off for him. Tapping Han and Jean, who actually seemed quite interested, I said, "I'm gonna go drop Raven off. I'll be back in a bit." As the two of us exited the Colosseum, Raven wanted to buy some food, so I gave him some money and waited at the exit. After waiting for a few minutes while looking at my smartwatch, I felt a gaze on me, causing me to look up. Not even 10 feet away stood Ruby, who walked over to me upon seeing me looking away from my smartwatch. "Aren't you participating in an event?" "Oh, that? Who cares? Which one did you even sign up for?" "Oh, I got chosen for the Battle Royale." "Oh, is she participating with Liam and Lily in the Battle Royale event instead of Irene?" It won't make much of a difference, they'll still win." As Ruby waved me goodbye, I saw Raven also arriving in the distance. He looked at Ruby and me for a second before stopping dead in his tracks. "Not again." After dropping Raven back to the headquarters, I spent the rest of my day walking around with Han or Jean and rotting in my bed. As the last day of the festival arrived, the cake shop was finally put up for sale in the newspaper, so I immediately pounced, using up some of my savings to purchase it. Since today was the last day of the festival, the famed Battle Royale event would be taking place. Ruby, Liam, and Lily had already qualified for the event during their performances in the previous days, and I was sure Lily would lead them to victory with her book knowledge, so there was no need for me to do anything. Arriving at the boarded-up cake shop, I entered with the key, ignoring the countless cracks in the walls and trash over the floor before heading directly towards the tunnel. Climbing down the ladder, I immediately made my way to the clearing before placing down my backpack, which contained some healing potions in case anything happened. I had put it off for long enough. It was time to understand my new ability, Dragon's Transformation, finally. As I opened my backpack, I saw the black cat suddenly jump out before immediately running to a corner of the cave and settling down. Had it been in the backpack the whole time? The cat was a mystery in itself. Not only had it managed to go back in time, but it also somehow led me to the painting in Ruby's room, which was another mystery. This cat was just a series of mysteries muddled together, but what should I do about it? Was I supposed to investigate an experiment on a goddamn cat? Step by step, I guess. Sitting cross-legged in the middle of the clearing, I basked in the silence and serenity for a few moments, letting out my chaotic thoughts. Focusing my mind solely on my body, I specifically concentrated on the center of my body, where all my mana would gather. Feeling an unknown red-colored substance in the area where my mana was stored, I moved it around and examined it to get a rough shape. After a few minutes, I finally had a rough outline. Inside my chest, there was a modern yin-yang symbol, as the yin was my mana while the yang was the blood-red substance. The two were so close to touching, yet so far as every time I attempted to move them together, they would repel against each other, breaking their shape, before quickly regathering to form the yin-yang symbol. Bracing myself for the upcoming pain, I knew what I had to do as I forced the blood-red substance near my mana, overpowering the repulsive force between the two. As the two opposites met, a sudden shockwave was sent through my body, causing me to fall back in pain for a few seconds. Regaining my composure, I once again examined my body and noticed that while the yin and yang symbol of the blood-red substance and mana was still there, a small purple particle was in the center of the symbol. Navigating the purple particle out of the center, making sure it didn't touch the mana or blood-red substance, I let it sit near my heart while pondering. Now, the question was, what do I do with it? Leading the sole purple particle up from my chest and towards my shoulder, I stopped it right at the spot where my wings had appeared last time. Leaving the particle there, I patiently waited a couple of seconds before feeling my back suddenly grow heavier. Sure enough, on my right shoulder, a wing had formed. However, rather than being a combination of pitch black and blood red, the black had been replaced by a light blue. So, I can either combine the blood red substance with my mana or corruption, and the colors change depending on that? Simply sitting still with the wing on my back, I patiently waited for whatever side effect this ability would cause. Just as my dragons, I caused my eyes to bleed if I used it for too long. Am I really a masochist? I'm just asking for pain now. However, after a couple of minutes of just sitting there, I felt nothing. Flapping my wings and teleporting throughout the room, I also felt no side effects. In fact, it actually felt calming. Examining my body, I noticed that the purple particle in my shoulder had shrunk significantly to the point where it could barely even be seen anymore. I guess this is the time limit? As the purple particles diminished and disappeared, I felt my thoughts blur and become convoluted, making me unable to focus on a single thing. It felt like my entire mind was in chaos as countless unrelated memories rushed through my head, overloading my brain. Clutching my head in pain, I dropped to the floor, immediately noticing that my wing had disappeared. Crawling over to my backpack, I grabbed a stack of healing scrolls worth over 10 gold coins, immediately ripping all of them in one motion. As the scrolls disappeared and turned into dust, a green aura began to surround me, easing the pain in my mind. However, when that aura disappeared, my mind immediately went back into chaos. Lying down on the floor, facing the ceiling, I simply gave into the pain as I attempted to close my eyes to fall asleep, only to be immediately woken up by the random and constant thoughts racing through my head. After who knows how long, I finally felt my mind return as I could actually control the thoughts appearing in my head. Sitting back up, I was in no rush to continue experimenting as I grabbed the meal I had gotten from one of the stands at the festival. Taking the container out of my backpack, I heard the sound of scratching on a hard surface, causing me to turn my head upwards, just to see the black cat, barely hanging onto the roof of the clearing with its claws. Seeing my look upwards, the cat released its claws, falling face-first right onto my head. Who said cats always land on their feet? Putting the cat on the floor, I watched it lick its paws with the utmost dignity, like nothing had happened, before walking up to the corner of the clearing to do who knows what. After finishing my lunch, I recreated the same process, leading a new purple particle out of the yin and yang symbol. Instead of moving it to my shoulder, I moved the purple particle to my hands, causing an enormous red paw to replace my hand immediately. Staring at the paw of a dragon, which had completely replaced my right hand, I retracted and extracted the claws for a couple of seconds. Leading the purple particle out of my hand, causing my right hand to appear again, I pushed it towards the back of my legs. Almost immediately, a long, bright red tail adorned with countless spikes appeared behind me. Was I some sort of transformer now? Checking my body every few seconds, I saw the purple particle was beginning to fade into nothingness, so I immediately moved it back to the center of the yin and yang symbol. A couple of seconds later, the purple particles disappeared from the center, leaving no trace and, most important of all, no pain. So, my new ability allows me to recreate any physical attribute of a dragon, such as their wings, tail, claws, and even legs. Is this dragon's will thing slowly transforming me into a dragon? At the next stage, will I be able to completely become a dragon or what? Combining the blood red substance with my corruption, I curiously watched how, like last time, the area where the particles of blood red and pitch black were located shined a bright red, even through my clothes. Lighting up the cave with my glowing right hand, I formed a dragon's paw once again before confirming that the only difference was the color, as the power output stayed the same. Checking my smartwatch, I realized that most of the festival had already ended. My social media page was filled with people congratulating Lily, Liam, and Ruby on their victory in the Battle Royale. On the other hand, my group chat was also blowing up. Apparently, Gene had placed all his money on their victory, so he was rich now. Gene, I told you be with me, I told you didn't I? Han, you also told me to bet with you the last 100 times and you lost all those times? Gene, 99% of gamblers quit before they hit big, and I'm now that 1% who made it through baby. Han, dude, the odds were 10 to 90, no sane person would bet on that. Gene, nope, the odds are 50 to 50. You either win or you lose. Picking myself off the floor, I sent a quick message to Raven, letting him know about our acquisition of the cake shop. Ren, you remember the cake shop where we met? Raven, how could I forget it? Ren, our meeting must have been that significant for you, huh? Raven, moron, I'm talking about the cake. Ren, you know, a simple thanks for getting you out of homelessness would suffice. Raven, yeah. Now, why are you mentioning that shop? Ren, it's ours, I dipped into the savings. Raven, you bought a cake shop? Ren, hire some employees and cleaners, it's kinda a dump right now. Raven, a cake shop, thank you boss. Ren, so, this is what you thank me for? Not me saving you from the black market, giving you a job, a house, and money? Raven, I just asked Zeng and he said he's down to work as the baker. That guy just gets less and less evil every day? Is he really a djinn? Sighing, I put down my smartwatch and headed back to the academy with the cat hiding in my jacket. With the festival now over, it was time for the main plotline to start once again. These pleasant and leisurely times were nice while they lasted, but it was quite hard to relax, knowing the upcoming events. The corruption of the World Tree should have begun by now. Heading into my dorm, I slumped down on my bed, clearing my head of all thoughts while drifting off to sleep. I woke up the next day, not to the sound of tourists bustling about, but to my cat, which was pawing at my head. Sighing, I reluctantly got up from the comfort of my bed and added some cooked chicken to its bowl. At this point, it was already part of my daily routine, and honestly, I was kinda scared of the cat. What would it do me if I didn't listen to it? Was this cat a god? I mean, it had traveled back in time with me. So, in conclusion, treating it well was probably the way to go for me. What if I forgot to feed it once, as it just gave me bad luck for the rest of my life? After changing into some casual clothes and making scrambled eggs for breakfast with a sauce that tasted like a sweet hot sauce from my world, I sat down while checking my smartwatch. Dear all first-year members of the travel club, I hope you've all had a great time at the Celestial Festival, whether you were enjoying time with family or having the honor of representing our school in one of the events. Overall, I hope all of you, as fellow students, had a great first semester, and trust me, this is only the start. With the first semester over and the second semester starting, it's, of course, time for club activities to resume. This year, however, our trip will be different. As Travel Club President, I am delighted to announce that all members of the Travel Club are invited to a week-long visit to Elven Realm. Yes, that Elven Realm. The lush, green forests north of the human realm, where real elves live. More details about the trip and our departure time will be sent out shortly, so please look out for the following emails. Thanks. Your Travel Club President. Putting down my smartwatch, I prepared to head to Capital City to check on the cake shop's progress. How was I going to explain that tunnel to Raven? Thud. Hearing a couple of knocks on my door, I looked up from my plate of food before getting up and unlocking the door. In front of me stood a student adorned in another academy's uniform with a smug expression. After a couple of moments, I remembered that he was the one who had blocked my way out of the classroom on the day Astrid and I left the academy to search. Sorry, you are? Ahem, I am the honored Blaine Bradford, the third-ranked student in the entirety of Eldtide Academy. Good for you. With a smile now apparent on his face, this obnoxious Blaine kid stared at me for a moment before twisting his head and saying, On behalf of Eldertide Academy, I challenge you, Rin, to a duel in the Coliseum. Really, dude? Ignoring him, I slammed the door shut and headed back to my plate of delicious scrambled eggs. Since his academy, Eldertide, had lost to Celestial Academy in the Celestial Festival, their reputation would be at an all-time low, especially after they claimed they would win in all the newspapers. Blaine, as a proud student of Eldertide Academy, must have been thinking of a way for the academy to regain its reputation. He probably thought that challenging and easily defeating a student from Celestial Academy would improve their reputation. Bang bang. I know you're in there. Ignoring the constant knocks on my door, I continued eating my scrambled eggs while my cat happily chowed down on the chicken. I could never let that thing discover steak. I would go broke just from feeding it. Bang bang. You have to accept, you can't deny. Sighing, I got up from my seat, placed my empty plate in the sink, and grabbed my school-issued daggers. Unfortunately, no matter how annoying this Blaine was, his words were right. If you were challenged to a duel, your choices were either to accept the duel or receive detention for a whole week. Since denying a direct duel request as a student would tarnish Celestial Academy's reputation as their students would seem scared and weak, the Academy imposed harsh punishments to persuade students not to deny these requests. Of course, with this rule in effect, students couldn't just challenge anyone they wanted to do a duel, they had to have a good reason. And, unfortunately, I had given Blaine that reason by throwing him out of the way when we first met. Opening the door, revealing the furious and confused figure of Blaine, I wasted no time as I grabbed his shoulder and forcibly dragged him out of the dorm building. Wait, what are you do dash? You said you wanted to duel? Let's go now. What the hell are you waiting for? This was your idea, wasn't it? Letting go of Blaine, causing him to stumble forward, I walked towards the looming Coliseum buildings, with Blaine following behind. Maybe when I had first transmigrated here, I would have purposely lost to make sure people didn't know anything was wrong with Ren, but who the hell cares about the old Ren anymore? I'm Ren now, aren't I? I could do whatever the hell I wanted. And what I wanted to do was to defeat Blaine quickly so I could go to the capital and complete my original goal of the day. Walking up to the guard, who was waiting outside the Coliseum, I pointed to Blaine while saying, "We want to duel?" Nodding his head like it was an everyday occurrence, the guard moved aside, letting Blaine and I pass through. Heading to the right, where the home team side was located, I handed my daggers to another guard, who confirmed that they were weapons allowed in a duel. Wasting no time, I rushed to the tunnel that led out into the Coliseum and patiently waited for Blaine's arrival. Peering across the Coliseum and into the other tunnel, I finally noticed Blaine walking up with a broadsword in his hands. While he didn't have a grin on his face anymore, he still seemed rather confident as he was holding his sword leisurely while leaning against the wall. Seriously, where do third-rate villains get all this false confidence from? I mean, the first thing I did when I entered this body was humble myself. That mountain tyrant in that mountain range cave really did numbers to me. The referee, who was sitting on a chair in the middle of the Coliseum, noticed us a second later before announcing, "The duel between Ren from Celestial Academy and Blaine Bradford of Eldertide Academy will now commence." While you might think that duels would take longer to organize rather than just simply walking into the Coliseum and asking for a duel, the Academy had already prepared for dozens of duel requests today, making the process extremely fast. I mean, even the Academy knew that hundreds of third-rate villains like Blaine would be salty about their defeat and duel someone else to get over it. Grabbing my standard daggers, I walked out of the dark tunnel and into the middle of the Coliseum, where a makeshift duel arena was already set up. In the middle of the Coliseum sat an elevated platform where the duel would take place. The rules were simple. You either lost by surrendering, being completely defeated, or being knocked off the elevated platform. Walking up the stairs of the platform, I noticed that despite Blaine asking me for a duel not even an hour ago, there was already a huge crowd in the stands. That goddamn idiot Blaine must have told everyone to come and blabbered about our duel so that they could witness him win it. "Kevin, where are you taking us? None of us have even eaten breakfast yet." "Yeah, dumbass, you can just show up and tell us to follow you." "Yo, Liam, you, of all people, are going to be happy, even you too, Lily." As the group of three neared the Coliseum, Kevin led them up countless stairs before finally entering the student section, which was half full. Looking at the somewhat crowded student section, Liam curiously asked, "Isn't the festival over? Why are people still here?" Lily, who recalled that the transfer students were all sore losers, thought for a moment before asking, "Is there a duel going on?" "Not just any duel." "What are you on about, Kevin?" "Liam, your one and only hater, besides me, is dueling today." Thinking for a second, Liam asked, "That Ren kid?" "Yep, not only that but the person he's facing is ranked top 3 at his own school. It is so over for him." Lily, who had already taken a seat, gazed out into the arena before asking, "Why didn't he just take the week of detention?" Taking a seat next to Lily, Kevin picked a basket of popcorn, which had just magically appeared, and said, "Are you really complaining though?" Taking a seat on the other side of Lily, Liam replied, "Yeah, Lily, let's just enjoy the fight, you know?" Inwardly, Liam was much more excited. Why wouldn't he be happy? Finally, the person who had attacked him for no reason and ruined the reward that the principal gave him by sharing it with everyone was being punished. Justice really is real. "What was that, Liam?" "Nothing, Lily." Looking around the student section, Liam noticed almost all of the students here were praying for Ren's downfall. Wasn't it weird that all the students here were wishing that their own team, Celestial Academy, would lose the duel? Nope. That was just the effect Ren had on everyone. Continuing to glance around the student section, Liam tried his best to suppress his laughter as a poster held by one of the students caught his sight. "Please beat Ren. He's not ours," Celestial Academy does not claim him. Kevin, however, failed as he burst out in laughter upon seeing the poster, taking a few seconds to regain his composure. That PFFFTIIC can't. Nodding his head, Liam replied. I think the student section is going to be more entertaining than the fight. As both Ren and Blaine emerged from their tunnels and headed up towards the arena, the student section only grew louder as some wild cheers could be heard. Ren, you're a joke, already fucking broke. Ren, you're a joke, already fucking broke. Unable to hold in their laughter, both Kevin and Liam broke into laughter simultaneously while covering their face with their hands. For the first time, the two seemed to be in sync and actually getting along like friends. PFFDT, thank you so much. Kevin, PFFFD. PFFD, why you're welcome. Lily, who was stuck between two, let a slight grin slip onto her face while staring intently at the arena. Ren, reaching the top of the stairs and arena first, stood awkwardly with a long, twisted dagger in each of his hands. On the other hand, Blaine took his time walking up the stairs, waving at the crowd, who was actually cheering him on. Noticing her sight of the fight was blocked, Lily looked up and saw a familiar face. Astrid? Oh, Lily, you're here to see the duel as well? Exchanging greetings with Lily, Astrid took her seat next to Liam, ignoring the cheering and keeping her attention solely focused on the duel below. Lily, returning her sight to the arena, saw Blaine finally arrive at the arena before the referee raised a large white flag and announced with a sound magic artifact. Duelers, please take your positions. Do any of you need clarification on the rules of the duel? The duel will begin when my countdown hits 0. 3, 2, 1, Dash. Ren, who had already activated the usage period of dash before the countdown, immediately dashed forward as the words 0 slipped out of the referee's mouth. Tapping his right eye mid-dash, Ren slowed his perception of time. Blaine, who had reacted to Ren's dash, held his sword horizontally, the perfect place to parry both Ren's daggers and give an immediate counterattack. Imbuing mana into his daggers, Ren, with time still slowed, swung his dagger countless times, creating 6 holographic daggers, all appearing next to his hands. Speeding back up time, Ren used the last of his mana on his daggers, activating a movement he had not used for a very long time, Serpent Slash. The slash that was able to temporarily paralyze your opponent upon contact. Sending his holographic daggers ahead of him, Ren watched as Blaine swiftly raised his sword by an inch to parry the new holographic daggers. However, that sword's raising was all Ren needed as he lunged forward with his right dagger, piecing forward and hitting the armor Blaine was using. Frozen in time, Blaine stood there with his sword, watching as the daggers he had tried to parry simply flew through his sword before disappearing into nothingness. Covering his hand with corruption, Ren used the force of the corruption to propel the frozen Blaine upwards and toward the edge of the arena. Blaine, who had regained his senses mid-air, attempted to land by pushing his sword downwards into the ground of the arena, but it was too late. Following up, Ren dashed forward once again, meeting Blaine mid-air, and palming him once again. Flying backward at an even faster pace, Blaine flew right off the platform and into the wall of the Colosseum. Slumped down on the ground, Blaine was dazed by both the impact of his head hitting the wall and his 15-second defeat. Looking at Blaine's body, Ren whistled before muttering, "What a combo! Guess, all that Super Smash Bros. Wasn't for nothing." With that, Ren simply bowed to the judge, who declared Ren's victory with a surprised face before heading back into the tunnel, disappearing from the public sight. Aaron of Celestial Academy emerges victorious. At the referee's words, the entire student section went quiet, even those who had been intently cheering a few moments earlier. Some of the students, who had been eating and missed the short 15-second fight, were looking at the referee in confusion. Astrid was the first to move in the silent student section. She simply nodded her head before heading to the exit and leaving the Colosseum. Kevin and Liam, who had previously been leaning back in their chairs and laughing uncontrollably, now held grim expressions on their face as they stared at the empty arena. But it was neither of them that broke the silence first. What was that? Hey, Kevin, you said he was third-ranked, right? Why Lily, he W's. Silently standing up from the chair, Liam gazed at Blaine's dazed body. Whoever said justice is real is fucking liar. This was the opposite of what he wanted. Ren should have been the one lying motionless against the wall, not that random Blaine. Kevin, who had dropped his basket of popcorn out of surprise, stared sullenly at the floor covered with popcorn before following Liam's lead and getting up. Well, it was only a matter of time before that loser did something with his life. I guess better late than never. But once a loser, always a loser still applies to him. I'll take justice into my own hands. What the hell are you on about, Liam? Amidst the two's argument, Lily stayed rooted to her seat. For any person, a development like this would be regular. After being disowned by one's family, one would definitely train nonstop to become more powerful and gather new skills. However, that wasn't Ren. A stubborn, cocky, self-centered, and spoiled brat. The words training wasn't even in Ren's dictionary. Did the book wrongly characterize him? Or was this the result of her changes to the story? Behind Lily, the students in the section came back to their senses as their conversation transformed from insulting Ren to accusing him of cheating. Hey dude, you didn't see any of the fight. I didn't see any of it. I'm not gonna say anything, but that referee might have been bribed. Of course, there were people who had logic in the student section who were able to recognize Ren's power, but they stayed silent, simply observing from a distance. While confirming that the cake shop was progressing regularly, I was surprised to see Raven and Zing both more enthusiastic, as they had already cleaned the entire shop. Alongside the fast progression of the cake shop, I was also surprised to hear that Zing could finally hide his horns. As your power as a Jin grows, you can better hide your qualities, so Zeng is probably equivalent to a D-rank hero, like me, as he can hide his horns. Heading back to headquarters, I decided to organize my subspace before heading to the Elven realm, as I was likely to return to the academy after my trip with a bunch of new artifacts. Looking at the dull metal sword stored in my painting subspace, I carefully held it in my hands for a second before confirming that there were no side effects. The blood-red sword had become a normal metal sword now. Heading out of the subspace with the sword in hand, I looked around for a second before spotting Zeng, who was being taught how to interact with humans by Raven. Zeng, what do you say when you meet someone new for the first time? Hello, fellow human, my name is Zeng. May I ponder as to what your human name may be? Is this some kind of joke to you? Whatever could you mean by that, Raven, sir? What does the word ponder mean? I found it in a dictionary and thought it sounded cool. This is useless. I'm a business owner, not some damn language teacher. As Raven stormed out of the kitchen, brushing by me, I turned and asked, "Do you know what ponder means?" No, but that's not my point. The way he talks is so fucking annoying. He's already using words I don't know, and he's spoken this language my entire life. Sighing, I left Raven to watch television on the couch while entering the kitchen, seeing Zeng avidly reading a dictionary I had brought to the headquarters from the academy. With Zeng now being able to hide his horns, he would be a formidable ally in future battles, so giving him a weapon was essential. Placing the sword on Zeng's dictionary, I waited a few seconds before he finally realized the sword's appearance and turned towards me. And what might this be, boss? Perhaps a sword? Raven's right, you really do sound like a pretentious prick. HM? What does prick mean? I don't believe I've seen that in the dictionary. It means a good person, but don't worry about that. This sword is all yours. Think of it as a reward for ranking up. This dictionary and a new sword. Are you planning on making M-? No, nothing about the painting. All of them are yours for free. Leaving Zeng behind as he continued to read the book, I waved goodbye to Raven before heading out. This would be my last time here for over a week. Upon re-entering the academy, I immediately returned to my dorm room to grab my packed suitcase, which only contained 2 pairs of clothes. I had really gone overboard on preparation this time. Lugging my suitcase down the countless stairs, I exited my dorm building and headed to the academy's front gate, where a single luxury bus stood. Of course, there weren't any magic gates in the Elven territory, so we had to travel the old-fashioned way. After taking the bus to the edge of the human territory, we would transfer over to carriages and ride until we reached the forest. Upon reaching the forest, we would regroup and head towards the central Elven village in the forest center. All in all, the trip lasted about 2 days. One day was spent using the bus, and another was spent riding the carriages and walking through the forest. Having arrived early, I put my suitcase in the storage space under the bus before boarding and finding a seat. Unlike the buses from the training camp, there were no separated sections, as it was just a normal bus, and people could sit wherever they wanted. Finding a window seat near the back of the bus, I sat down before taking out my smartwatch and checking up on the news recently. Clomp clomp. Hearing the sound of footsteps echoing throughout the bus, I saw Lily entering the bus with an expression that seemed like a mixture of confusion and anger. Recalling my antics in the duel earlier, I wasn't surprised at her confusion, but I was somewhat surprised why there was anger mixed in there. Busy. Jean, yo, Ren, you're not a celebrity, respond to our texts. As the sound of my phone vibrating filled the bus, I slowly looked upwards, locking eyes with Lily, who was staring at me. Raising my trembling hand and waving, I suppressed my laughter while staring at the shocked Lily. Silently staring at me as I sat in my seat, Lily stood there for a solid 10 seconds before slowly walking towards me. Well, I can't complain. I knew what I was doing when I won that duel. But, was it really that unlikely to Lily that Ren had improved and trained after being disowned by his family? I mean, damn, I was a reader like her too once, so I knew personally how evil and stupid Ren was. But still, he was only in a single chapter. Did she really believe she fully understood Ren's character and personality as a whole after reading just one chapter? I know third-rate villains are supposed to be plain and straightforward, but come on. Well, in Lily's mind, she had already introduced dozens of variables, so this wouldn't be that hard to justify in her mind, would it? Looking up at Lily as she approached my seat, I honestly didn't know what to say, so I just waited for her. Stopping before me, Lily pointed to the aisle seat next to me and asked, "Anyone sitting there?" Pardon? I'll take that as a no. Sitting beside me, Lily also took her smartwatch and began texting away. What was her end goal here? To interrogate me, to investigate me, or to keep an eye on me? Well, I wasn't planning on doing anything on the trip to the Elven Kingdom, but I'm a high school student. I don't need a damn babysitter. Putting down my smartwatch, I stared out the window, contemplating my decision to arrive early. Yeah, arrive early and get a good seat, my ass. As more footsteps entered the bus, I didn't bother to look up as I awaited the bus's departure. Things couldn't get any worse, could they? Feeling my smartwatch vibrate nonstop for a minute, I eventually scanned the bus for a second and noticed Han and Jean sitting in the seats right in front of Lily and me. Looking at Lily, who was simply staring at her smartwatch, completely distracted, I discreetly leaned forward and whispered through the seat. "What's up?" "The hell do you mean, what's up? Going back to your ex, really, dude?" Jean, let him explain. But Ren, come on man, you can do better. Both of you, it's nothing like that, alright? Doesn't seem that way to me. Ren, lying to your own friends for her, desperation really isn't the way. Noticing Lily looking up from her smartwatch, I ignored the two and leaned back into my seat. The misunderstandings would solve themselves when Jean and Han noticed the unbearable and awkward atmosphere between us. What was that about? A simple conversation between friends? Didn't seem like a simple conversation. Eavesdropping isn't a good quality, is it? When you're whispering that loud, I can't help but hear. Busy. Jean, still nothing like that, huh man? Silencing my smartwatch, I turned away from Lily and back to the window. As the last pair of footsteps entered the bus, I heard the doors slam close before the bus started moving. Sighing as I looked ahead, I could hear the argument between Liam and Kevin at the front of the bus. For the last damn time, I don't know where she is. Liam, so help me God if you're lying. Kevin, she's definitely on the bus. The traveling president took attendance. Oh, real fucking specific, man. Remind me never to help you ever again. Crouching back down under the cover of my seat, I avoided the prying gazes of Liam and Kevin as they glanced around. Fortunately, the bus had no lights, as students were supposed to sleep during the ride to prepare for the upcoming carriage ride so that Lily couldn't be spotted by the two as well. Hearing another set of footsteps, I looked upwards and saw the familiar figure of Ruby navigating her way toward Lily's seat in the darkness. Is this just the Ren fan club meeting? Watching Ruby near our seats, I was tempted to say something, but with Lily right here, any interaction between us would be heavily monitored. As Ruby passed by, I pulled my hood over my head, concealing my face, but as Ruby took a seat in the chair right behind Lily, I felt my blood pressure actually rise. This G-Luck stat was really starting to piss me off.